One day, the employee comes to his boss and talks about an emergency. The guy really needed 2 days off. The alarmed young man expected a refusal and promised to catch up as soon as he worked again. Hearing about the need for weekends, the boss recalled that recently in the new department of short films, there are especially lacking staff, because of which the ruins are not provided. At that time, the impudent man watched a stream on his phone. There was a beautiful girl who danced. In order to thank the streamer for a beautiful dance, the boss decided to give her one of the most expensive gifts. Seeing a gift in the form of a rocket, the girl was incredibly happy, and she thanked her donator. The upset guy continued to claim that he really needed the weekend because his mother was ill, and now she was in the hospital. He needed someone who would care for her. The adamant boss decided to clarify whether the employee has a father, and if he is also busy, then there are other relatives that could help. Because this was just a disease, for such a reason the weekend was not provided. Communicating with his employee, the bastard continued to look at the stream. The same streamersha said that thanks to this gift, she would continue to conduct her heir. Meanwhile, the worker was trembling with anger. He did not even know how to get the weekend. The arrogant man explained that it was impossible to climb the career ladder without sacrificing himself, because he worked overtime even on the day of his father's funeral, and became what he was now. That is why the boss ordered the employee not to destroy the efforts of their department because of one person. Only the guy continued to beg the day off, saying that he could work even from home. Laughing, the insolent ordered him to forget about the remote work, because if he wants a light life, then he just should quit. According to the insolent, the employee must also understand that he is a graduate of the University of the Third Level and got a job in the largest media company in the city because the organization urgently needed new personnel. The boss sincerely believed that the guy should be grateful and asked him to think carefully before asking for the day off again. Sometime later, the blonde rested in his room when suddenly someone called on his phone. As it turned out, the boy was called Sinwan, and his father called him, asking him to come. The man called him from the hospital because the nurse asked Mr. to pay bills for treatment Mrs. Zhou, because there was enough time, and further delays in payment would make it difficult to treat. But Mr. Khan promised to settle everything in a couple of days that the girl did not like much, because a few days ago he said the same thing. And if this time the situation is not resolved, the patient would have to be expelled. Hearing this, the worried man only began to nod his head, showing that he understood everything. During a telephone conversation, Sinwan also heard everything. But his father did not show that they had big problems. Being worried, the young man promised that in a few days he would return and could help with payment for treatment. Having sighed heavily, his father asked his son not to worry about it, because he already took some money from relatives and friends, and his mother has medical insurance, which would cover a considerable part of the expenses. Continuing a telephone conversation, the young man promised that he would definitely pay the rest of the debt, and asked not to borrow money from his relatives because he would understand. According to his father, his son only recently graduated from the university, and the cost of life in Sand City is high, which is why he could not have any savings, which is why the Khan suggested that Zinwan wanted to take a loan. As it turned out, the hero has been working for a year and a half, and although his monthly salary is only 5,000 yuan, he significantly saves, sharing a bunk bed with other people. Besides, he spends only 10 yuan on the food for the removal, and sometimes earned. Mounting the video, so he managed to accumulate 50,000 yuan. Sinwan was sincerely convinced that 50,000 should be enough to cover the costs of mother treatment. Going into the corridor, the guy thought that he was more than 20 years old, but he had never achieved anything. And today he was going to make a decision opposing the values of his ancestors. Thus, he came to the department for the search for employees to implement his dream in life. Putting his head, Sinwan bitterly understood that now he was officially unemployed. And it was under the current conditions in the labor market and the economic situation that he decided to quit. Without finding another job before that, his act was really reckless. At that very moment, the young man felt changes in his body. He heard a strange voice that repeated to him that the system of absolutely and freedom was activated. Looking around, he did not understand what was happening, and a certain voice claimed that the activation occurred, since the owner made a decision contrary to the desire of his ancestors. Before the eyes of the young man, there was a certain interface where it was written to check his prize money and also pamper himself and not hesitate, because the more expenses, the more money he will have in the future. In order to check his cash balance, Sinwan took out his phone. The SMS message really indicated that more than 80,000 yuan was sent to his account. A stunned guy could not believe that this really happened. and suggested that scammers could do it. That's just the second message came, which indicated that the funds were really credited to his bank account. The amount of enrollment was shocked by Sinwan into a pleasant shock, since he previously received 5,000 per month, and now he was almost rich. If he could not see it with his own eyes, then the guy would never have believed in his life that this is generally possible, and this actually happened. With his actions, the protagonist was able to awaken the system, thanks to which now she sent him money. It was a system of absolute freedom. Sinwan guessed that he was able to activate the system as soon as he quit his job. Looking at his bank account, he suggested that it is not so difficult to understand this system, so he would be able to find an opportunity for this. Suddenly, behind the protagonist was a stranger who asked him what he was thinking about. The incredibly beautiful girl wanted to know Sinvana whether he prepared a plan for her upcoming direct broadcast. As it turned out, it was Gao Wan. She was a blogger, sang and danced for 8 million fans throughout the internet. Looking at such a chic Gao, Sinwan could not restrain his admiration and immediately blushed. Due to the fact that the girl really liked, he even listened to what she had just said and asked to repeat. At that moment, Gaowen decided to come closer and hinted to the guy that he recently very absent-minded. Strimmersha repeated herself, saying that Sinwan introduced her more operating resources because recently fans who paid the most began to relax, and the replenishment has slightly decreased. The girl in front of the main character was the main internet celebrity, and he was responsible for her broadcasting on the network. She was known as the Goddess of Dancing. In real life, she was friendly and not at all arrogant. A little embarrassed, the guy explained that he had already quit and would no longer be responsible for working with the influencers, and the company had to organize the transfer of authority. Such an unexpected statement immediately embarrassed the Strimmersh, and she decided to find out why Sinwan decided so suddenly to leave. Although the young man knew that Gao Wen did not look at others, she only casts oblique glances at him because he is familiar with the activities of the influence, and it is easiest to communicate with him after the dismissal of their path diverge, so they have nothing more about speak. Thanks to his decisive action, the protagonist realized that he had found clarity of mind in this world. That's just Gao Wen decided to stop him and asked if he was quitting because she still wanted him to be her manager, because she did not trust anyone else. Looking at his girlfriend, the young man felt that she somehow behaved strangely, and before it was not, although the streamers was good to the main character, but in fact she saw the benefit in him, and Sinwan did not want to feel deceived. A decisively determined guy exclaimed that he wants to arrange a long vacation. Suddenly, Gaowen decided to gain her former manager and clarified which company he plans to go to, because now they can become competitors. Someone else will be engaged in its blog, and who knows how much time it takes to get used to the new manager. The behavior from the girl was very exciting, and the hero could not restrain himself. However, with the system, he can easily become a billionaire, which is why the hero will have much more in the future charms. Continuing to look at Gao Wen, Sinwan saw that she had worked very much on her appearance. At that very moment, the blonde exclaimed that Strimmersha should have corrected his nose a little because he seemed a little crooked. Such a statement shocked the girl in a moment. She clearly did not expect such a statement. Hiding her nose, Gaowen was embarrassed, her face blushed, and she decided to ask me to ask if her nose was really curved. Getting a small mirror, the girl decided to make sure of this personally, looking at her nose. She wanted to understand whether he was really a curve. As it turned out, the nose really looked a little crooked. The live broadcast was supposed to begin soon, and it was necessary to correctly correct the lack. Suddenly, the system praised the protagonist, telling him that the owner actually refused to be in the service of the beauty, for which he received a reward of 23,000 yuan. Without stopping watching his phone, the main character was shocked by what was happening, and his bank account was now 162,000 yuan. Smiling, the guy finally realized what absolute freedom is. Starting to laugh loudly, the young man thought that it was necessary to be himself and refused to be simple, because it was the rules of the system. Winking at her comrade, the girl thanked him for his cooperation, and since he had already decided to quit, she was not going to dissuade him, because perhaps they will still have the opportunity to cooperate in the future. Such a statement shocked the guy, because he expected that Gao Wen would simply be furious when she was indicated, but she was calm. Continuing to watch the streamer, Sinwan even thought that she could just pretend. The enthusiastic girl exclaimed that in the end, they were colleagues, and he was her manager for so long that today she would treat him with a farewell dinner. And if he has problems with the search for work, then they can write off. Meanwhile, the guy continued to reflect on what was happening, because probably Gao Wen knew about his level of education and was worried that he simply would not find another job. A little embarrassed Hero exclaimed that he should treat his girlfriend with dinner, but she decided to remind that he did not have such a large salary, so it is better to save. Since Sinwan quit, he decided not to think about money, because as the girl said, they can cooperate in the future, and it should be assumed that this is his pre-expressed gratitude for support from the sister. Feeling awkwardness, the lady only now realized that she did not know her colleague at all. Turning around, the guy explained that he had already collected things, so he would go now and contact her after work. The happy young man was pleased with his decision because he understood that he was now free and could do what he wanted. Previously, the hero walked on foot when it was possible and used public transport if he could not get on foot. He avoided a taxi, with the exception of cases where there was no other choice. In everyday life, even joint trips by taxi with someone to divide the price were literally luxury. That is why Sinwan decided to order the most expensive car, because he decided to pamper himself properly. After literally 1 minute, a gorgeous car arrived, it seems. It was Porsche Cayenne. A man of pleasant appearance came out of the car, who exclaimed that a service called Luxurious Trips from Dita had arrived, and asked the client to get into the car. As expected from a luxurious car, she arrived in less than 3 minutes. She also had incredibly beautiful shapes and an amazing engine sound. Remembering the events of the past, Sinwan did not dare to order a taxi earlier only for himself, although there were cases when it was too late to look for someone for a joint trip. And now, most likely he would have returned home only about midnight. But now his life has changed dramatically, which very much pleased him very much, since the present he was completely different. A dear driver again invited his client to get into the car while opening the door for him. The system noted that the owner feels so wasteful, takes a taxi without looking at the price, and recklessly indulging his own desires. They rewarded with it and accrued 50,000 yuan at the expense of 50,000. The contented hero exclaimed the driver to stop the car near the pancake called Laosi. The feelings of the trip on such a car were really very pleasant, because the same expensive luxury was felt. In just a few minutes, a very high-speed car reached the point of purpose and stopped in a moment. The same newly made rich man began to get out of the car and did it slowly. The world's worldview has changed sharply, because now he was not afraid to spend his money. The grandmother at the counter noticed that her regular client came for food and decided to clarify whether he would order a pancake without eggs and sausages. However, now everything has really changed, and Sinwan said that today he would make another order and asked to add 2 eggs to a portion. He also asked to put 2 sausages from pure meat in the pancake and not from starch, which immediately struck all the people nearby. Having bowed his head, the guy realized that when his monthly salary was 5,000 yuan, he gave 800 of them for rental housing and could not spend more than 20 yuan on a day, for the 5th ordinary pancake cost 8 yuan, and he never dared to add egg. But now he did this and went up to a new level, giving 15 yuan for lunch. All people envied him, because since he was able to add not only 2 eggs but also 2 sausages from pure meat, people began to justify the actions of this guy. They say that in fact, the sausages with starch are tastier, and to get used here. The contented young man continued to eat his pancake with 2 sausages and eggs, and at the same time the system, for a huge leap in the standard of living, gave him 20,000 yen. The day was really wonderful, because the hero received incredible pleasure from this hearty snack. The next time he was strongly configured and was going to add as many as 5 eggs to a portion. Remembering the former, Sinwan realized that when he was a student there was no money at all. When he began to work, it became not only enough money but also time. It was completely incomprehensible how ordinary people were generally having fun. Passing by a familiar building, the young man drew attention to one very important detail. He immediately half a stupor because he forgot something incredibly important. Having hit the head, the hero realized that now he has a lot of money and he could go to the shopping center and shit. It was also necessary to reduce Gao Wen today for dinner, because he heard that in expensive restaurants a strict dress code. The current appearance of the protagonist was not suitable at all, because he looked like a homeless. That is why Daredevil went to the shopping center for shopping in order to update his wardrobe. Passing by the shops in the shopping center, he noticed one very remarkable store called Louis Vuitton. He had never seen such stores before, and in the shopping center there was a smell of orange everywhere, and the name of all brands were in English, because of which he did not understand anything. Looking around, Sinwan tried to read the name of the stores, but he did not succeed at all. The shopping center was indeed incredibly huge, but in it there was not even Adidas, which he was so diligent. At that very moment, he stopped abruptly because he understood something. Laughing, the protagonist realized that now he was not a rustic and could be stuck in the shopping center in full. His choice nevertheless fell on the Louis Vuitton store, near which he stopped. Two very beautiful store workers immediately noticed the buyer and realized that he needed to be served. However, an experienced manager immediately looked at the potential client and began to analyze his appearance. It was evident that the protagonist was not combed, his bag was clogged with rubbish, and the phone was an old model, the price of which was around 500 yuan. The pants were bought at a discount from the market, and the shoes were also from the market, and it was very worn out. Looking at the consultants, the young man saw that no one decided to approach him at all, as if everyone had considered him poor. Outraged, the hero decided to find out if someone in this store would serve him. Although he looked poor, but from the saleswoman it also perlo snobbery, because they were quite ignorant with their client. The unflappable guy exclaimed that he was tired after work and did not want to walk himself and choose, because of which he wanted to choose clothes for about 150,000 yuan. But since the saleswoman behaved like that and did not approach him at the same time, he was going to go to the neighboring Hermes store in order to buy clothes there. The statement from the boy was a really shocking discovery for girls because they really did not expect anything like it. Joyful girls at a moment arrived in time for their buyer and began to interest his clothes or bags and asked to sit down to drink tea. Because while they pick up his clothes, it was at that moment that the main character realized that the money really decided everything. Thus, Sinwan bought himself several dozens of things, because of which he now looked amazing. And the managers asked him to come again for purchases. Rich people were really chic. They even wore things instead, and they will deliver where exactly he will order. One of the girls invited the buyer to attend an event on a jewelry at the end of the month. Only the hero said that he would do it when he has time. Little reddening a little, the employee clarified whether Sir wants her to deliver things to his house. The newly made rich man refused, saying later that he prefers to do everything himself. The blue-eyed beauty gave him the purchased things and wished a good day. Nearby, two girls talked among themselves, saying that there are Louis Vuitton and Hermes stores in Loganda, and if they have a desire, they can look at something. But the girlfriend was against it, because they did not dare to buy things from boutiques, only through agents. Looking at his brand new handbag, she did not realize that his things are really expensive, since ordinary people could not buy them. At that very moment, the system noted that the owner spent a 3-year salary at a time, and an achievement was obtained for the first serious loss. Let it be cast, but with the style, which was due to which a reward of 660,000 yuan was accrued. Very little more, and the main character can become a multimillionaire, which is why he was going to spend even more money. Sometime later, the events continued to occur in the evening, namely in the exquisite Western restaurant. The glamorous and stunning protagonist went straight to an expensive restaurant. A friendly girl turned to Mr., saying that she would lead him to a reserved room. Having scratched his nose, the guy noticed that he probably came early, from which he would have to wait for a while. As it turned out, the VIP box has a separate recreation area, which is why the client will be able to enjoy their desserts, waiting for guests. Looking at the girl, she was not noted that he was really met on a clothes, and before he could not dream of a similar service. Arriving in a separate recreation area, desserts and tea stood on the table. The client could be free to treat himself alone, and if something was needed, he could simply call the bell. Little Red, the manager said that she no longer dares to disturb her client and asked to enjoy the rest. Looking at the indescribable view from the window, the hero could not even imagine that he would see how Sand City looks from the 40th floor. At that moment, Sinwan began to think about the fact that while you have money, the best service is available to you. And while you have money, you are standing at a height that others only dream of. The dreams that I languished for so long in his head have finally come true. Distributing from his thoughts, the guy remembered that at first he would throw the money to his father so as not to frighten him, and transferred 100,000 yuan to his account. He was going to say that it was from part-time jobs, and relatives should not be asked unnecessary questions or scared from such large sums. Meanwhile, Gao Wen led her stream and begged gifts from her spectators. I looked through the broadcast. The young man was thinking about taking the geolocation for Gao Wen and the name of the restaurant, but she did not answer, but simply strimmin as usual. Such behavior on the part of the girl was really quite strange because she completely did not pay attention to Jinvan. Sometime later, Streamsha nevertheless ended the air and told the audience that next time they would see tomorrow. After a heavy broadcast, the girl was incredibly tired and wanted to relax a little. Work colleagues invited Gao Wen to go with them and hang out, but the lady replied that today she already has plans. Laughing, the red-haired girl nevertheless decided to find out who was her gentleman this time. And was it really another dad? The tired lady replied that she was not like that, and everyone knows this guy because his name is Sinwan. Other streamers knew that this guy left, but they realized that Gao Wen did not forget him, suggesting that there was clearly something between them. However, Gao Wen asked not to come up with anything superfluous because Sinwan previously helped her when he was a manager, and now he quit. And this is just a dinner, and even more so, he treats. After listening to her girlfriend, another girl exclaimed that she, in this case, also wants to go with Gao Wen. In fact, it really was just a dinner, and since the guy treated it to them, this place is probably not very expensive, but if it turns out that this is an expensive restaurant, then everyone will pay for himself. The girls were not opposed because they were very tired and also wanted to pamper themselves. But another girlfriend was against such a turn of events and did not want to use someone else's kindness. After all, the red-haired lady understood that Sinvana had such an exhausted face that he could not even afford to eat an extra egg during a snack. After listening to her girlfriends, Gao Wen said that she needed to wash her makeup, and sometime later they would meet in the parking lot. After 10 minutes, the girlfriends really met in the parking lot. In one of the parking spaces, there was an incredibly expensive car. Recently, it was very difficult with advertising on streams, and the girls did not understand how Gao Wen was able to afford such an expensive car. But she only replied that it was necessary to conduct the right dance streams. But the girlfriend did not want to lead these streams because they are very tiring, because she will not be able to dance from morning to night like a sister, and will wait until there is some good-natured fan of her. A skeptical friend exclaimed that Zhang just wanted too much, because in their sphere, they were already lucky that their sponsors do not meet each of the girls, so she also hopes for fans. The girls' dreams were destroyed in an instant, since her friend really thought more rationally. Meanwhile, Gao took out her phone in order to see where exactly they needed to go. Seeing the place of the meeting, Streamersha was just in shock, because she did not expect that Sinwan would invite her there. Gloating over the reaction of her friend, Streamersha suggested that the place is really very cheap. At that very moment, the girl said that it was a restaurant called Lingwei, because of which a girlfriend immediately fell into a stupor. This restaurant was in the Qinshan building, because of which the girl began to get nervous even more. In this restaurant, the price for a person was at least 3,000 yuan, and it was almost impossible to reserve a place. Listening to everything that was happening, the girlfriend suggested that probably Gao Wen was simply mistaken, because it is impossible that Sinwan suddenly got rich. However, another friend considered that perhaps the guy chose another institution in this restaurant, and some people specifically do this for showing off. A smart girl realized that her comrade is completely not a conceited person, and one should not judge him before they find themselves in a restaurant. Thus, they decided to go to the place and find out what's what. An expensive car began to drive at an incredible speed. Audi really had a good suspension and high comfort in the cabin. Girlfriends examined the car and admired it. They understood that Gao Wen of many rich spectators, because of which she could afford such a luxury, the red-haired girl wanted exactly the same car for herself and was ready for her anything. She even began to tell her friend what needs to be done in order to earn such a car. But the girls did not quite like it because she didn't want to do this even for the sake of a lot of money. Because if some thickness wants to marry a streamers, then she should become a hostess. Glancing at her girlfriend, she decided to find out why Gao Wen was silent all this time, as if looking down at her. However, the lady believed that to marry because of a whim, without financial independence, it means to bring herself under voluntary slavery to her husband. This approach did not radically suit the red-haired girl, and she did not believe that Gao Wen would always build herself cool because her dances on streams are very provocative. In fact, Gao Wen simply wanted to provide herself, because while she could still work and wants to earn as much as possible, men can give, but money never. A few seconds later, the expensive Audi was in a parking lot of an expensive restaurant. The girl in a gorgeous outfit began to get out of her car, slowly towards it. The girlfriend decided to add oil into the fire and exclaimed that she should still clarify the place because probably Sinwan did not call them here. They were ashamed to come in and immediately get out of such a place because they do not have armor. If someone recognizes them and launches online, they will lose their subscribers because of such an incident. During a call to the main character, unfortunately he did not answer, and only beeps were heard. The so-called girlfriend only gloated, thinking that Gao Wen paid for her retirement. Looking at the phone, Strimmersha suggested that perhaps the con was just busy. Without showing her dissatisfaction, the girlfriend offered to go upstairs to find a guy. In fact, she just wanted to see the grandiose shame of Gao Wen. Nevertheless, Gao decided to go upstairs in order to find out what was the matter. She understood that she had a licking expensive place, although she could afford herself, but also remembered how much Sinwan received, a plus for everything he loved to save. Her thoughts did not stop, because she understood that such a chic restaurant was very expensive for a young guy, and perhaps he even made fun of her, because of which she would have to treat absolutely everyone. Sometime later, they nevertheless entered the restaurant, and Gao Wen examined Sinwan. Fearing the failure, the girl looked out in the doorway, in the hope that the guy will still be there. Looking at her smartphone, she still realized that her comrade did not answer calls. Fortunately, Sinwan finally called her, which she was very happy about. At the same second, a restaurant employee came and decided to clarify the guests if they had a table booked. Frightened, Gao Wen did not know what to answer, but her friend exclaimed that the table was really booked. Waiting for a failure, the girl still said that the table was booked in the name of Kan Sinwan. But the friend realized that the manager's salary is 5,000 yuan. The position in the menu in such a restaurant is at least his 3-month salary. And it was interesting how Gao Wen could get out of this. However, there was no setup. A friendly restaurant worker said that Mr. Khan has long been waiting for his companions. Such a turn of events was really very surprised by the girlfriend. She clearly did not expect to hear something similar. The company of 3 friends went straight to the VIP room, obviously not expecting such a chic service from the restaurant. Looking at Gao Wen, the red-haired girl only thought that she was very lucky, because the company is allocating resources, and she firmly entrenched in the first place. And this Sinvan is really ready to spend money on a large one. But in the end, it can be left without money and without a girl. The girl did not believe that Gao Wen really liked someone pretending to be rich. Having pointed with a hand where it should go, the manager asked the girls to go inside the elevator. In order to get into the VIP room, it was necessary to move in the elevator. After thinking a little, one of the girlfriends remembered that this elevator is intended exclusively for VIP clients that can climb the observation halls on the top floor. And one of these people turns out to be Sinwan. 1 out of 10,000 people, to be precise. Even a skeptical friend did not believe in this, suggesting that Sinwan was just a namesake with someone richer. Meanwhile, they climbed the 40th floor, which was quite high. Opening the door, a friendly girl said that now they can sit down at the table. Looking around, the girls saw that Jinvan was not in this room. Well, since the famous streamers came to such an expensive restaurant, they were going to take a picture to show this to their subscribers. To the surprise of a friend, no one else began to take pictures, because they say that it is impossible to take pictures in the lobby. It is possible only in separate rooms. One of the streamers decided to secretly post a photo on the social network, because no one will know that she secretly made her way here in order to eat. A frustrated trader told her friends to take a picture with himself because Sinwan invited the guests, but he did not appear. For her, this was not a surprise. The blonde, meanwhile, watched the photo taken and reflected on the fact that she had never been at dinner in such an expensive restaurant. No one knew whether she would have a chance to come here again for dinner again, which is why she continued to admire the photograph. The disgruntled girlfriend turned to Gao Wen with the question of whether Sinwan answered. They did not want to put themselves on the laughingstock, because probably this could be a misunderstanding. Meanwhile, a restaurant worker knocked onto the room, asking whether Mr. Khan woke up, because guests came to him. Gao Wen even suggested that perhaps they were really mistaken, because Sinwan was just an ordinary office worker and was unlikely to be able to afford dinner here. However, at the same moment, the main character began to leave the room, exclaimed that he simply fell asleep, and he woke up because of 4 or 5 missing calls, which was due to which he hoped that Gao Wen did not wait for him for a long time. Looking at the waitress, the young man asked her to begin to bring food, and she only nodded approvingly. Looking at her comrade, Gao Wen noticed how much he changed over these few days. Such sharp changes really shocked the girl, because she had never seen Shinvan in such a choke before. Girlfriends were also shocked by what was happening, because this Khan was dressed in branded clothes from head to toe, and his jacket cost about 40,000 yen. As it turned out, the envious friend found out that it was the last collection of Louis Vuitton, and Sinwan looked like he was a rich man in the 2nd generation and hid it. The dissatisfied girl did not understand how Gao Wen could be lucky, because she quietly picked up a rich man, and it seemed that she was very pretending to be very well. Having stepped closer to one of the friends, the young man noticed commas that she was probably called Zhang Xinchin and said that he was pleased to meet. Looking at the girl with red hair, he decided to clarify her name because he did not know him. Having straightened her red curls, the lady said that her name is Tsu Sinuo. Directing his gaze down, the guy apologized because he only woke up, so a little confused because Sinuo looked a little different without filters. Without giving a look, Tsu said that everything was in order because today she did just light makeup. During the conversation, she inadvertently bit her lip. It seemed that she was thinking something. Gaowen explained that she was just finishing work, and two colleagues wanted to join, and she thought that if Sinvan was not objecting, then they could stay and eat together. At the same second, many waiters began to bring a large number of variety dishes. These astronomical delicacies shocked the girls, because they understood that such chic dishes were a fortune. Even Gaowen doubted the wealth of the protagonist, because she could not even share the score, and suggested that Sinwan built himself as a person. Zhang Xinchin noted that next to them was a rich man in the second generation, and probably he quit his job to return and inherit the family business. The alarmed girl did not even know what to answer this. She blushed and was very embarrassed. Looking at a steak of marble beef and half a glass of wine, the main character did not understand how all this could be eaten, because this is just a small piece of meat. Although he looked appetizing, nearby was also an omar and a few cuts of beef that looked very appetizing. Waiting for the moment of the meal, Zhang Xinxin could not resist, and clarified her friends if they objected if she takes a photo. The guy was completely different, and said that they could take as many photos as they want. In order to upload photos to social networks, it was necessary to capture the best moments. Zhang Xinxin did this. Meanwhile, CYU Sinuo decided to clarify what was actually happening here, suggesting that they were deliberately kept in tension. In fact, they were not so close with the Shinvan except for the work of work. Then they almost did not speak live. Several marketing events in which he helped her, brought benefits, and for this she was grateful. At that moment, Gaowen remembered how poor her friend was, that he did not even have enough money for a taxi. Earlier, he even asked to follow the link to get a taxi discount and a ticket for a high-speed train, because he lacked money for this. Then Gao suggested that perhaps her comrade was simply a modest and pragmatic rich man in the second generation. This time, perhaps he did not want the girl to pay for food, so he showed that he was rich. Turning around, the young man turned to the waitress because he decided to clarify if they have something simpler and more satisfying in their diet. Hearing this, Zhang Xinchin literally began to admire the hero, because he was not afraid to say something like that, because last time someone treated her lunch, which cost more than 1,000 yuan per person, but she never ate. Confused, the waitress offered with beef rods with black truffles, prepared over low heat, with a sauce from salmon caviar. However, from the mention of these names, Sinwan disappeared, because it was boring. He wanted a dish to be prepared on high heat, and not slow, and asked to bring more imported crabs, beef and lamb, as well as cut the meat into pieces. The girls for the first time saw someone ordering this in a high-kitchen restaurant, which was striking for them. But as it turned out, Sinuo was clearly not impressed, because there was no point in going to a French restaurant if you want to eat something like that. With a regret, the girl realized that Sinwan was really a rich man. Although it was more like that he was just a deceiver. After a little thought, the young man also asked to fry the kidneys on the grill and the barbecue on the skewers, specifying whether they could cook it. The dear waitress replied that, of course this is possible. Sometime later, the waiter was horrified because she talked with the cooks and upset the guests, saying that they only served dishes from the menu, and began to apologize. The guy was not at a loss and asked to call the manager because he would like to discuss this, because he was very dissatisfied with these dishes. Such a turn of events even more surprised all those present at the banquet. A few minutes later, a half-hearted man arrived. Greeting the master, he introduced himself as the manager of this institution. The man was very sorry, but they had a French restaurant, so only French cuisine is served. Listening to all this, Tsusinuo gloated because the village was just humiliated. She did not understand the guy's desire to insist that he was prepared by a barbecue in a French restaurant. Suddenly, the protagonist shouted that he was paying 300,000 yuan in order to eat the kidneys on the grill and Baronine barbecue. And if he is arranged, he will give another 50,000 as tips. Hearing this, the manager was simply dumbfounded. He did not know how to react to such an offer. Stremershi also fell into a stupor. They froze, waiting for an answer from the manager. The expression on the face of a rather evil man changed dramatically. and he decided to clarify with the master what kind of roasting he needs to cook the kidneys. Putting his hand on his shoulder, the young man said that he would reward the manager with the largest sashimi from the kidneys in memory of their fidelity to the restaurant standards. Although he liked the daring appearance of a peasant more, by acquiring a rather daring appearance, the man exclaimed that the gentleman should sit down, because he will immediately go and dispose of in the kitchen. At that very moment, the system encouraged the owner for the fact that in an elite French restaurant, he was impenetrable, like a wall. Indeed, according to the protagonist, the food was supposed to bring pleasure and saturation, which he said to his companions. "It is in her hand." Zhang Xinchin exclaimed that she also thinks so, because photographs of the kidneys prepared on the grill in an elite restaurant can be even more interesting for social networks. Sometime later, the dish was successfully prepared. The waiters experienced some bewilderment but still carried food. A fairly ordinary dish was placed on the table, which are prepared literally in any bench. According to the girl, the money really decided everything, because if someone has it, then that person can really do whatever he wants. Having taken out his phone, Zhang Xinchin thought that no one would believe her if she said that she ate barbecue on shambles in a French restaurant with 3 Michelin stars on the top floor of the Qintian Tower, the highest building in Beijing. Xinhuan, contentedly, exclaimed that he should enjoy this dinner with the ladies. After literally 10 minutes, most of the food was successfully absorbed by the main character. Wiping his mouth after such a chic meal, the young man said that he needed to leave the toilet. At the same time, the girls discussed among themselves that they could not understand that this Xinhuan was for a person, because his clothes were worth at least 150,000 yuan, which means that he was from a rich family. Zhang suggested that probably for the sake of such as Gao Wen, such rich people come to work in their company. But the girl sincerely believed that she was not so beautiful. But the girlfriend believed that rich people love to taste life, which is why they experiment constantly. Turning to her girlfriend, Sinuo decided to find out if Gao Wen was really untouched. And did she really not like Xinhuan? The blonde directly popped up a heart when she thought that such a rich guy could take care of her, and also spend tens of thousands of yuan to just please her and have dinner together. But Sinuo, on the contrary, was interested in why Gao Wen was behaving so calmly, as if she knew about it and hid it from her friends. And she seemed to say that Xinhuan was nothing from herself, and now she already laid her eyes on him. Putting a barbecue on his skewers, the girl only replied that she was behaving as usual. And she did not have thoughts in her thoughts that a comrade was so rich. After all, they were not so familiar. On the contrary, he behaved as the most ordinary guy. I was hardworking and restrained, and also lingered at work until late and worked overtime, because he tried to be the most valuable participant in their company. A skeptical friend still assumed that Xinhuan was simply pretending. Otherwise, in their time, many love to pretend to be rich, while I treat the girls with expensive dinners. Suddenly, Zhang Xinchin realized that as soon as the girl mentioned this, it can be assumed that Xinhuan was just an excellent actor. Fortunately, the girlfriend had the only way to check whether the main character is really a rich man, and she decided to try it. But Gao Wen did not see the need for this, because on their part, it would be too much to check the person who himself invited them to dinner. Putting her head, Kinuo mentally asked her friend not to arrange scenes here. After all, it was not worth forgetting that Gao Wen is a large and famous star. Any person to win it would spend hundreds of thousands of yuan, and then the man will begin to manipulate her, revealing his true essence so that friendship with such people for Streamersha can be dangerous. After listening to her friend, Gao Wen exclaimed that in fact she did not want to start a relationship with Xinhuan. In any case, it was not worth worrying because now they were going to reveal his true nature. Because they, like the sisters to each other, first Su Sinuo will help them, and then they will help her someday. Sometime later, events continue to take place in a car parking lot. 3 girls, along with the main character, were heading somewhere. Looking at his comrade, Gao Wen suggested that if he really pretends to be that he had no money, then she would pay for him anyway, but still hoped that he did not make anything bad and did not get into debt. Because with him, it should have been fine. Suddenly, Zhang Xinchin decided to find out from the boy if he has a girlfriend. A little embarrassed, Xinhuan replied that he had no one, and he was alone all his life. Such an answer simply dumbfounded the girl. She immediately fell into a stupor and mentally asked, "Was it really so?" Grinning, Xinhuan explained that before his head was scored only by work, and he did not have time for a relationship, and all in order to live with this money literally like a dog, saving every salary. Such a fate was really sad. since the young man suffered very much from his work and was clearly unhappy. Due to the memories of his past work, Sinvan was literally shaking because he realized with a regret that he was really a loser. One of the girls saw that at the moment only 9 p.m. and they could call in a club. Although the Sinuo was not as rich as the brother of the Khan, she could still treat them with a couple of drinks because she just knew one suitable place. Celebrities often looked into this place, and perhaps they will be able to make new acquaintances there and learn something new, which is why the main character agreed with joy. Thus, they immediately headed to the nightclub. It seemed that the guy felt a little awkward at the moment when they were traveling. At the same time, Gaowen kept silent all the way, as if something embarrassed her. The main character thought that since he had a lot of money on his account, it may be worth opening his own media company. Indeed, in fact, he worked so much that he knows almost from head to toe how to build an excellent organization. Thanks to knowledge, there will really be the opportunity to achieve unimaginable success and work with a large number of stars. Arriving at the club, Sinuo immediately said that this is a very expensive institution. The prices are such that she can treat her friends with only a couple of drinks. It will really be hard for her to pay if they drink much more, but still decided to find out whether her companions were against her. The benevolent comrades were not opposed, and with joy they were ready not to abuse the kindness of Cyu Sinuo. Looking around, the protagonist noticed a rich man in the company of 2 stunning beauties. In fact, Sinwan was happy that he could finally visit this famous institution and was in anticipation. Friends headed straight to the nightclub, where there was a party in all. Observing everything that was happening, it was clear that Sinwan and Gao Wen felt a little awkward until the other 2 girls suited. Taking the menu, the girl said that she would be Margarita and decided to clarify that her comrades would be. Gaowen immediately explained that she needed a non-alcoholic mojito, since she would be behind the wheel, but Zhang Xinshan decided to order a lady's pink. Turning to the guy, the girlfriend decided to find out from him that he would order. In her opinion, he simply pretended to be from a rich family, because it looked so that he never walked around the bars and did not know what to order. After he examined the nightclub, Sinwan was distracted and asked for what exactly was asked from him. Waving his hand, the young man only replied that he really cares, and the lady could choose any of the drinks. That is why the QU decided to order Long Island. Zhang immediately noticed this, since her friend ordered a very strong drink, and probably Sinwan, when she drinks it, can tell the whole truth about herself. However, the friend was completely the same, since such institutions were intended in order to drink well. Sometime later, when they began to drink cocktails, Sue remembered that there was one bartender, Dennis. He prepared excellent drinks, only they were quite expensive, and she wanted to try one of the cocktails. The dissatisfied Gaowen immediately asked her friend to stop herself but the girl did not react at all to this request. After all, CYU sincerely believed that if Sinwan wants to continue to behave like that and portray a rich boy, then he needs to teach him a lesson. Meanwhile, the main character noticed that in this club there was a couple of famous streamers, and in order to start with them, cooperation needed to accumulate a little more money. During the appeal from Tsu Sinuo, she was successfully ignored, which had a very strong one. Nevertheless, the guy was distracted from his thoughts and decided to clarify what the girl wanted. As it turned out, she decided to offer to play in the bone. Fortunately, the comrade was not opposed, but still decided to find out exactly what rules of the game. The girlfriend decided to make the game more interesting, and she had a rather unusual offer. If Sinwan loses, then he either gives part of his clothes or pays 10,000 yuan. Such a proposal really made fun of the protagonist, and he was even a little embarrassed. Stepping closer to the CYU Sinuo, Sinwan exclaimed that he should not forget that he used to work in the company and saw all the affairs of the employees, including her, and he was well aware of what kind of skills she possessed. The hero also knew that she played the bone well, and none of those present could beat her, which is why she, with the help of deception, wanted to make her give her money. Sinwan understood that Siyu thought that he was just a small bipod in the company and earns 5,000 yuan a month, and that he could not have a brighter future in his life. The poor man, who was only a miserable fate, but suddenly today I saw that it has things from Louis Vuitton. He invites them to luxurious restaurants, and after that they go to the expensive club, which is why he probably pretends to be rich. Nevertheless, the guy decided to admit, saying that the lady was right, and he was really not from a rich family. A contented girl exclaimed her friends that she was right, and Sinwan really was nothing of her herself. Laughing from such a statement, the young man interrupted the girl and asked to wait, because he had not yet agreed. Although he was not from a rich family, he had a lot of money, So he offered another game in response, and for 300,000 she will leave this club completely without clothes. Confused, Kushinuo immediately began to deny and blushed, then said that this offer for her is incorrect. Trying to discharge the situation, Gao Wen reassured the boy and said that it was just jokes, and it was not worth angry. They would better sit down and have a good rest. Suddenly, Q decided to doubt that the protagonist has 300,000 yuan at all, since no one believes in it. At that very moment, without hesitation, Sinwan shouted to everyone that he pays 300,000 yuan today and pays for a drink to everyone. Having extended his bank card up, the guy exclaimed that today there would be fun at his expense. One of the employees of the nightclub said that the payment was successfully made, and 300,000 yuan entered the club's account. Visitors to the club were simply delighted with this boy and very glad that he is so good-natured. In fact, none of those present could have thought that such a generous person was clogged among them. Due to its generosity, the system gave another 666,666 yuan for Xinvan, since he invited all those present to drink at his own expense. And this was amazing. Su Sinuo watched everything that was happening and stood as if they were dug, because the hero knew that she usually looked down on such poor people as he. But he did not need her respect. Indeed, in the end, for him personally, people like a pipe only miserable bugs. People who worry only about money can also be humiliated by the same money. After such a turn of the events, Sinuo did not even know what to say. She simply continued to stand as if dead. Soon she still sat at the table, and bowing her head continued to be silent. Two friends also felt rather embarrassed because this act made them think. Suddenly, CU rose from her seat, because she just remembered that she had plans for the evening, so perhaps she would go. All in tears, Strimmersha began to literally run away. In upset feelings, she was destroyed. Seeing the reaction of his opponent, the young man did not react at all. Jiang Qinshin, meanwhile, was noticed that since all the drinks were paid, they can still sit here. Suddenly, some once-haired girl came up, and seeing that it was Gao Wen, she decided to clarify whether she spent either that unsuccessful stream and came to drink grief. The impudent girl came even closer, and noticed that today the main fan of Gao Wen somehow supported her weekly, and probably he could leave soon. But the lady wanted to talk about working during working hours, because she was resting now. The stranger asked me not to build myself in a short time because it is no longer popular, because she always exposed her charm so far, and the pretense was useless. Wronging around from the girl, Gao only replied that this does not concern her at all. It was evident that the young man was dissatisfied with this behavior by the villain, and clearly wanted to do something. Suddenly, the bastard sat down at their table, because for her it was a great opportunity to carry out a direct broadcast. Such a chance could not be missed. That is why she immediately began to conduct a live broadcast and greeted her spectators. Saying that she met Gao Wen is a successful opportunity for her to conduct a joint stream. But Strimmersha noticed that Gao was clearly not eager to conduct a joint stream, and asked the audience to persuade her together. As it turned out, today one of the subscribers stated that he was ready to send so many missiles to the villain so that she could overtake Gao Wen and take first place among the streamers. With such an advantage, it would definitely be possible to overtake it. At the same second, someone called on a mobile phone, and she said that she needed to urgently answer. It was her manager. He said that it was urgent to hurry and immediately start a live broadcast because there were too many subscribers, and do not miss such a chance. Despite the fact that the girl was just resting, the manager ordered her to start immediately because they had already paid for a place on the main page, and it was no matter how she felt. Sometime later, Gao nevertheless came to Strimmersha, and she noted that a popular girl is very active and incredibly loves her fans. Having decided to clarify the opponent if she was afraid, the girl replied that she was not, and said she was ready to start. Putting the camera on a tripod, two streamers were preparing for the dance in order to show the audience. The dance began, and despite its fatigue, Gao Wen was irresistible. Seeing the stream, Zhang Xinchin noted that a lot of missiles were launched by subscribers, but only they were not for Gao Wen, which is why she lost. The bastard was very pleased with this outcome of events. She laughed openly, showing her superiority. The audience noticed that probably Gao Wen used some kind of program during streams, because for some reason the live performance was very weak, and if you compare the two of them, the girl clearly lost. Opening the stream, the main character also noted that judging by the voices, now there will be a new top of one streamer in the world. A smart guy immediately guessed that the opponent Gao decided to play dirty, and this meant that it was necessary to intervene. At that very moment, someone decided to breakfast and gave the most expensive gift on stream. Suddenly, Gao Wen noticed this, because a big brother gave her a rocket. A friendly girl immediately showed a heart in gratitude and thanked her viewer. After this little gratitude, even more gifts began to come, because of which Streamersha was incredibly happy. It was evident that her opponent was clearly unhappy, because she expected to win in this battle. However, the pink-haired girl did not expect that her opponent had other top donators. Looking in the commentary, the hostile girl noticed that the audience was wasting money, because Gao Wen allegedly had already won, and there is no need to send more gifts. This event made the lady be in shock. She continued to congratulate the big brother for even more missiles. The guy still decided to clarify whether it made sense to continue the competition at all, because it was noticeable that Gao won. As it turned out, it was the work of the protagonist. The system congratulated him, because he spent money as if he had their bottomless pockets. It looked too elaborate, and because of which 5 million was given to him as a reward. Looking at everything that was happening, the girlfriend even suggested that perhaps someone had a child from someone, and by mistake he began to poke the buttons where it got. But no one realized that it was Sinwan. Due to such a large number of gifts, Gao Wen simply fell into a stupor. She did not even know how to react to this, because she was very tired and no longer wanted to conduct a stream. Meanwhile, one of the rich in the diamond level of Streamershi Shui followed everything that was happening, and was unhappy that this event was ignored. In order to support the opponent, she also began to give gifts, and she thanked her fans. Her main top donator wanted her to send him a video and personal messages, and this was not a problem for her, since he is rich and generous. After all, with all her might, Shui tried to achieve unprecedented heights and overtake her opponent named Gao Wen. Such a turn of events only made the main character laugh, because he realized that he seemed to have found a worthy opponent. The tired girl continued to dance, although she no longer paid attention to her fatigue, because she was able to earn a fortune for one stream. The next few seconds passed unforgettably, since the big brother sent as many 500 missiles for Gao Wen. The system even noticed that the master did not stop surprising her. And now he finally entrenched as the top donor Gao Wen, and received 10 million as a reward. The victory was for the beauty of Gao Wen, which she was sincerely glad and thanked her most ferocious fan. After another gratitude, it turned out that this was not the last gift, and the top donator sent another 1,000 more missiles for Gao Wen. As it turned out, the more missiles the big brother sends, the more money they will receive, and the system gave him another 10 million for efforts. Gao continued to thank her fan in every possible way, but she said that in order to make money it was necessary to work a lot, so she asked to stop spending money on her. Putting her head, the lady finished dancing, and everyone in the comments began to discuss that they would like the same good-natured and unbiased girl to themselves. Watching the comments of the audience, Shui simply realized that all her efforts were in vain, and it so happened that Gao Wen got all the glory. Tens of millions of yuan were spent on donates, millions of spectators on stream. Even the most top streamers on the platform could not dream of such indicators. Without giving a visa, the main character began to yawn, and said that it was too late, because of which he had to go home to go to bed. Turning to the subscriber, Sinwan encouraged Shui, saying that she should not despair because he thinks that she also did well, and several large brothers came to support her. After eavesdropping on this conversation, the girl suggested that the words of the brother could strongly angry Shui. It was really so. The girl just stood as if they were dug and was silent, bowing her head. The boy was completely all the same. He began to go out, and with a laid-back smile left the battlefield with a well-deserved victory. Sometime later, events continued to occur near the entrance to the club. Zhang Xinxin noted that Shui had obviously an evil face, and white, like chalk. Probably she is now cursing herself, because her plan has completely failed. So, the girl today found out that their older brother Khan is a super rich, and Gao Wen, the largest donor, appeared among all that is on the platform. Having finished her statement, her friend decided to clarify whether Gao Wen really was not happy about this. As it turned out, at that moment, Streamersha felt that she simply felt unworthy of all this, because she had never met such a stir among the donators on her streams. Because of this, she was even somehow alarming. But the girlfriend believed that all this is trifles, because for sure some wonderful guy decided to support her, and he should get to know him better. A decisively configured girlfriend still took the phone and was about to send him a message in private messages. The message was successfully sent, and it came straight to the phone of the protagonist. which is why everyone heard a notification. Not expecting such a turn of events, two friends turned around to look at Shinvana. It was then that Zhang Xinshin realized that it was a sound from the application for watching streams. And it was strange that she had just sent a message to the top donator, and it came to Sinwan. Probably, Gao Wen had already guessed what was the matter, but still did not give a look and was simply silent. Taking strong awkwardness, the guy began to make excuses, saying that it was not him, and this is just a coincidence, and no more. Despite the fact that he quit, he is still coming from work, so he should not invent. Having looked at Shinvana, Gao Wen decided to find out from him what he would do next, because now he spent $1 million, and perhaps he plans to spend $1 billion. The guy sincerely believed that he did not need to spend so much money because he has a lot of it, but he does not earn $1 million in a second. With discontent, looking at a friend, Zhang Xinshin remembered that a big brother in nickname had a van, and it really could have been Sinwan. Suddenly, Gao Wen decided to stop this conversation, and his boyfriend asked how he lives. Because I wanted to let him down. Sinwan said that he lives near the Lunhuan area, but it would be better if he takes a taxi. Suddenly, someone shouted the name Gao Wen, thereby drawing attention to himself. It turned out that it was a drunken man who said that he saw her stream and just thought that the rear background of broadcasting was very similar to this club, because of which he decided to breathe, and apparently just in time, met her. A drunk fan did not particularly delight the girl, and she turned away from him in order to continue the dialogue. This man worked earlier in the company, and noticed that he was also a former worker named Sinwan, because of which he was interested in what the unemployed forgot in this place. Because such spineless as he could only rely on women. That's just Gao Wen decided to finish this conversation, saying that she was relied on to Shinvana because he invited her to dinner, and then they went here, and the comrade treated everyone with drinks. These words immediately forced the bastards to think. He was on the floor in a stupor, and did not know what to answer. Without believing in these words, the villain began to laugh, and asked not to tell him fairy tales because this poor fellow is not capable of something like that. Continuing to interpret that Sinwan is an unemployed loser, a drunken man also noticed that some mysterious stranger paid for a drink, and he did not believe that the young man could be. Suddenly, the man realized that there was nothing to achieve anything in life because he could only lie to everyone and deceive young girls. The green-eyed beauty decided to intervene in the conversation and said that Sinwan really paid today for everyone in this club. The disgruntled manager shouted that Zhang Xinshin at all. No one allowed his mouth to open. According to the bastard, the girl does not dare to talk to him because she has only a few fans, because even these fans were not real. These words immediately forced Zhang to experience sincere dissatisfaction, and she decided to find out what the villain spoke of. In fact, the company swelled a lot of effort into it and spent a lot of money on promotion to wind up my subscribers, and it only all day and does that she sits all day and stryming about its cosmetics, instead of withdrawal in which something popular show or advertising. For the company, the girl was an asset that works at a loss, and she followed to study with Gao Wen, since only one dance in the evening and the company earned millions. The manager also said that since Zhang Xinshin streams, she could dress and somehow, when she was painted, because there was nothing to build herself out of herself. Stepping closer to the best streamer, the villain decided to clarify whether Gao Wen really was sure that she no longer wants to be a streamer who is dancing. After all, today she did a tremendous work and brought a lot of money if she agreed to some kind of application. Then tomorrow the manager will tell the boss to raise it. Then Gao Wen could act on television. Holding his hand, a vile man began to hint at what can be achieved if only one night is spent with him. Watching everything that was happening, the main character did not endure this, and grabbed the villain by the hand. The unflappable guy asked the man to show at least a drop of respect for the girl. Having removed his hand, the manager called Sinvana a beggar, and said that he should clearly not play the hero now. The disgruntled villain began to claim that the guy could not give anything to such a girl, because he himself goes in foul clothes, so he should just get out of here. The insolent continued to say that Sinwan is not worthy of Gao Wen, because he was worse than the homeless. Looking at the boy's back, suddenly, Strimmersha noticed that he somehow began to glow strangely, but did not show it. Starting to leave, Gao Wen at the last moment said that if the manager would once again pester her, she will tear the contract with the company. After such a statement, the dude simply began to mock, because he believed that such an outcome of events is impossible. After all, the contract was signed for as many as 5 years, and at least another year they have to go to the future. And if Gao Wen wants to leave, then she will need to pay a fine of 10 million yuan. Having closed her eyes, the girl decided to remind you that she only earned several million, plus her personal savings, which is why she would easily pay her a fine. So, unperturbed behavior from Gao Wen enjoyed the manager, but he continued to smile maliciously. After that, he shouted that the streamers call themselves influencers, although in fact they are simply people with a price tag. If they lived several hundred years ago, they would be called representatives of the ancient profession, because they built innocent, although in reality they were actually everyone knows everything. Nevertheless, the man decided to be honest, and said that even if the streamer pays a fine, the company would not let her go anyway. After all, no one in their right mind is going to give someone a dairy cow. And besides, only one word of his boss and it will fall on the blacklist of all other companies. But this statement made Gao Wen be very nervous because Strammer's career will simply be destroyed after that. Staring for his girlfriend, the protagonist exclaimed that since she could not leave, then so be it. A smart guy was going to buy a company called Meow Media in order to help Gao Wen. However, in this case, not only Gao Wen, but also the manager himself will have to quit, that Sinwan voiced with malice. Taking a little shock, the man froze, thinking about whether it is possible at all. With visible anger continuing to look at Shinvana, the manager said that this is really impressive. To show his superiority, the bastard even touched the protagonist. Such a finger at him. He shouted that such a poor guy could never buy such an expensive company. But the manager would sincerely wait for this. Turning around, the future unemployed spat out the accumulated saliva and exclaimed that Sinwan had a lot to have broken him. Soon, the villain began to retire, thinking that Sinwan simply decided to boast of the rest. But in fact, he was not capable of something like that. Suddenly, Zhang Tasinshin began to tremble with the awareness of his fate, because she thought she was a rather successful streamer. Although in fact, all her subscribers were wound, and living people simply did not look her, Streamer did not immediately understand what a friend was talking about, and decided to find out what she had in mind. From the awareness of his fate, Zhang Xinshin began to cry. Since her fans on direct broadcasts and those rich who constantly prevailed her were truly false. They were hired by the company. The girl was in despair, since her whole career was fictitious, and in fact there were no success. A friend began to convince her that in fact everything is wrong, and very many people like to watch how she did makeup on stream. And the wealthy Gao Wen knew, which she really liked. The manager simply wanted to put on her to manipulate. A friendly friend begged the girl not to be upset because of the words of this scumbag. The main character watched everything that was happening and decided not to interfere in this dialogue because he understood that Gao himself could cope. Gao also decided to thank Sinvan because he stood up for her, and she thanked her friend for being able to understand the whole truth about Shui. Trembling from the awareness of his fate, Zhang Xinshin said that you should not thank her, because moreover, if not for her, then it would not be possible to find out that Shui looked down on everyone. Having calmed down a little, the girl began to scream that Shui is a villain who spoils life to everyone. Stepping closer to the main character, the lady announced her gratitude, but henceforth asked not to do this anymore. Because besides, she and Mr. Hay colleague, laughing, the young man exclaimed that nothing was afraid because he still did not like him. But then there was a chance to express everything. Gao Wen even made such an ambiguous dislike for the manager, because she also did not really love him. Nevertheless, Gao did not know whether they would get all such a company again. But she hopes that Shinvana was waiting for a great future ahead, and asked him to protect herself. From such a statement, the young man was even a little confused. He did not immediately know what to answer. Having shook the girl's hand, he replied that Gao Wen should also protect himself, and a great future is really waiting for there too. Thus, a rich streamer's left in her expensive car. At that very moment, the guy realized that he was so carried away by sending the missiles on stream that he had not even noticed alert. Now on his account, there was a whole fortune that people earned in his entire life. The main character really became a real millionaire, and he was incredibly happy because of this. He also understood that it was necessary to hurry and have time to buy a train ticket to get home, but still he decided that he would better fly by plane. Choosing the next date, the guy began to look for the cheapest routes in order to buy a ticket. Tickets were really very expensive, because before that, Sinwan traveled in only 300 wen at the express trip. In his head, nevertheless, he acquired the same cherished ticket for an airplane because he decided to fork out. The flight really turned out to be quite expensive, and the amount was released at 4,015 wen. Due to the fact that Sinwan has chosen the most expensive option, now he will be able to enjoy once in his life by a flight in the first grade. For this he had a reward of 10,000 yuan. The next morning, Events continued to take place in the dorm room. Suddenly, someone began to knock on the door with all his might and screaming that the time came to pay for rent. The protagonist was clearly unhappy with such an unexpected event, because of which he immediately woke up. Experiencing strong anger, the young man tried to close his ears in order not to hear this scream, because they came to him a week before payment and began to whine and yell here, because of which Sinwan did not understand why the owner did so if the payment time did not come yet. At that very moment, the hostess shouted so that Sinwan would not pretend that he was not at home, because there was time to pay for rent. The time was only 6 more in the morning, and reluctantly, the guy still rose from his warm bed. Nevertheless, Sinwan began to leave, and said that he was at home, but answered the woman that people should give sleep at least a little longer. He opened the door, the woman began to shout that the youth is now solid lazy people, and each time they need to remind of payment, in her opinion, it should not be difficult to show at least a drop of responsibility and pay on time for the rent. Having scanned the QR code, the young man paid a year ahead for housing because I no longer wanted to meet the home writer. Seeing this, the woman fell into a stupor because she had never seen anything like this before. As it turned out, 10,000 won were transferred through Alypius. A laid-back guy even yawned, pretending that he was still on such a waste. Looking at the young guy, the woman did not understand where he had so much money from him to pay a year ahead, because he used to pay right on the last day of the month. Looking at the amount of the transfer, the household also noticed that the blonde had overpaid 400 yuan. Without accepting it to heart, Sinwan only replied that about 400 yuan should be forgotten, because it was a payment for the service so that in the future the homeware would not bother him for a whole year. After that, he immediately closed the door, because he wanted to sleep at least a little. The silent woman continued to stand straight near the door of the young man, experiencing strong anger. The sleepy guy still decided to lie down on his bed, because the plane was only at 10 huor, so it was possible to sleep 3 more hours. Looking at his neighbor in the room, the comrade could not understand whether that jackpot won, because he paid for the rent a year ahead. It really was very cool. But he also threw her hand out in the form of payment for half a month. At that moment, the hero was already completely, since he was already asleep. And at the same time, he was a millionaire. Suddenly, the system praised the boy, because he surprised himself and suddenly paid for rent for a whole year ahead. So he also left the tips housewives. The dumbness of the master reached new peaks, and as a reward for such a master received villa in Sanbei in Sang City, from which Sinwan immediately woke up. Such a reward was impressed even by the protagonist. He could not believe that for such an insignificant waste, he was able to get a whole villa. Now Sinwan had not only a room, but also a separate house, literally a whole villa. Probably it was giant. Hearing his neighbor around the room, the young man fell into a stupor because he could not believe that the blonde was so rich that he had his own villa. Having decided to postpone his morning sleep, the guy still began to dress as he was preparing for the flight. Like a ninja, he jumped from his bed and did it rather hastily. Comrade instantly noticed that his friend was leaving somewhere very quickly and decided to clarify why he was running away so quickly. Continuing to run, the hero explained that he would go home to visit his parents, and now he quickly runs to the airport. Due to haste, probably a neighbor in the room forgot the luggage, because of which the guy said that a couple of bags should be taken. But Sinwan replied that he would go without things. Meanwhile, the parents of Sinwan were in the hospital, and her mother was in the ward and recalled that her son would come today. Mr. Khan mentioned that their son had transferred 100,000 yuan to his account, which he had saved when working. A friendly man sincerely understood that his son with honest labor earned this money, and they were directed to help their family. At that very moment, Sinwan burst into the ward, who immediately greeted his mother. A little tired guy sweated and exclaimed that he arrived, asking his mother how she feels. The woman smiled because she was glad to see her son. Her health improved slightly and had to do a small operation, but now it was much better. Father even fell into a stupor because he noticed that his son suddenly arrived, and he may have problems at work due to unscheduled leave. However, the son nevertheless explained to his parents that he decided to quit. So now there was nothing to worry about. Such a statement shocked his parents. They unanimously decided to find out why their son still quit. However, in any case, they supported their child, saying that they should not worry about this because they were sure that Zinvan would be able to find a better job. The hero really was very pleased to realize that mom and dad, no matter what, support him and his decision. Turning to his father, the young man still decided to find out if he managed to pay medical bills. Putting his hand on his son's shoulder, his father notified that he managed to borrow money to pay everything. and it was better to talk to Sinwan with his mother now. And you have 100,000 that he transferred. The man will return to him, because he is already an adult, and he has where to spend this money. Thanking his father for his care, the guy asked to leave this money to himself, and clarified who exactly the money was borrowed from, because they can now directly go there and repay all debts. Feeling a little awkward, his father explained that he took this money from relatives, taking dissatisfaction. Sinwan suddenly realized that the money was probably borrowed precisely with his aunt. The decisively tuned guy wanted to go back to return this money to them immediately. However, his father began to stop him, asking not to worry, because as soon as they and his mother have money, they will pay immediately, because Sinwan really worked a lot in order to earn money. After overheaving of the conversation, my mother began to cry. They say that she was to blame for everything, because if not for her health, now everything would be in order. Her son tried a lot, and she and his father worked a lot, and simply could not take this money because Sinwan spent a lot of time at work, and he always sent all the earnings to them. Trying to calm his parents, Sinwan began to claim that his work was really not hard, and he was not tired so much. Continuing to convince his mother that everything was in order, the guy explained that he simply decided to earn extra money, and got a job for a part-time job, worked a bit, and earned these 100,000 there. Now he was going to go to the doctors and say that they needed the best doctor, and it would not be necessary to worry about health. Only at first Sinwan was going to run to his uncle, from whom the dad occupied money. Otherwise, I did not want to feel like someone obligated. Sometime later, events continued to take place on the street where the young man was looking for a transport. Finding a small moped with the driver, the hero drove on the road to Kutong 32. With incredible speed, transport began its movement, and the roads unfortunately were not of better quality. Experiencing a feeling of discomfort during the trip, the hero was just shocked by the pits that were on the roads. Then he recalled that the authorities said that for 2 years they would make new roads, but it was all in potholes. The driver explained that with this repairs of the road a whole story, there was a contractor, and he seemed to begin to make asphalt. At first he removed it and then began to align the earth, but soon after that he simply disappeared. Such a statement caused a guy discontent, because he did not understand where the law looked at all. Because in such a wilderness the state did not give a damn who was creating what. Having bowed his head, Sinwan at that moment only thought that if he were not lucky with his parents, then he could become a beggar and remain to live in this wilderness. Dad and mother were still able to give him an education. A few minutes later, the hero was at the destination where his relatives lived. Looking at the luxurious mansion, Sinwan sincerely envied them, since his relatives lived almost as a whole. His area was simply huge, and his family lived 10 times less in a brick hut. The young man simply did not have enough anger to endure all this, because if they would not get the whole inheritance of his grandfather, then their family could live in abundance, and now they have to beg them to give for treatment the unfortunate 50,000 yuan in debt. The decisively tuned boy moved straight to the door of the mansion because he wanted to solve the issue. To attract attention, and one of the relatives opened the door for him. Sinwan decided to knock on it. Suddenly, an incredibly beautiful girl came out of a chic mansion, because I wanted to know who knocks on the door. It was Van Zhu. She immediately recognized the boy, and he in turn decided to find out what the girl was doing in his uncle's house. At that very moment, the same uncle came out who asked if the guy really wanted to say that his future wife was better not to be in his house, but in him. At that moment, the hero realized what happened, because of which he immediately turned away. Closing his eyes, the young man explained that he came here in order to repay the debt. Looking at the Zinvan, the girl did not understand why he looked at her so coldly because before she ran only after her. But his uncle noticed all this and ordered her not to look at the guy like that. Van Zhu's mood changed dramatically, and she exclaimed that Sinwan looks like a complete insignificance, and it was a sin to absorb him. And his clothes had one brand, while he also said that he was living in a big city. According to the girl, it was much better to live in their outback, since it was possible to allow themselves to wear Nike and Adidas. Thus, the hero still managed to get into the mansion, where an elderly man was already waiting for him. At first glance, a friendly peasant noted that his nephew granted him to visit him. He works in the city and now became just like a full-fledged city dweller. Friends began to laugh at this statement, because in their opinion, Sinwan should make good money so well because in large cities you can rise. But the uncle reminded the elderly man that the father of Shinvana occupied 50,000 wen to treat his mother, but the guy himself earns only 5,000 wen per month while working as a horse. Stepping closer to his enemy, Mirzov was also noticed that it is impossible to save anything from these 5,000 yuan salaries. The unperturbed guy exclaimed that he came to his uncle in order to give a debt and not to be torn with his tongue. The man asked not to rush because his family had a difficult situation, so it was not worth a hurry with repayment, and he would take interest in any case. Sinwan asked not to worry about him because everything was in order, and he did not occupy the money laughs more. Suddenly, his uncle said that he would like to remove politeness to the side, because they both understand that Sinwan is now living in a big city and tries with all their might to accumulate money and help his family. It was really so, but the blonde in any case was going to repay the debt. Well, since the guy insisted so, otherwise his uncle was not going to dissuade him because he was normal to return it in parts, because of which he asked his son to bring the red book that was in his office. The impudent son of the uncle noticed that they were a family, and he could not watch how Sinwan climbs out to pay off debts, because blood ties should be more expensive than money. Laughing, Uncle also noted that the Khan is a graduate of the university. Pride in him does not allow him to use other people's money, but the main thing is that everything is crystal purely between them. A few minutes later, the protagonist transferred to his uncle at the expense of 51,000 yuan, because it was just the amount with interest, and he asked to check that the money came. The shocked man immediately took out his phone in order to see if the money was really credited. Seeing the amount on a bank account, his uncle was just in shock because he noticed that the debt was completely repaid. Being in shock, the man still decided to find out from his nephew where exactly he got so much money. Starting to leave, Sinwan only smiled and said that he was working in a big city, and for him this money is not very large. But the guy exclaimed that the nephew's family wants to keep his face in this way, and asked his son to humiliate and work so that he would earn a lot of money and pay them. Van Zhu even decided to conduct him, because he probably still cannot believe that she will become the wife of the brunette, because soon they will all here become relatives, and will see much more often. The red-haired man ran out into the street and exclaimed that she and the Sinvan would soon become relatives, so they should not hold on to old feelings and behave as if they were generally seen for the first time. After all, from childhood they were friends and grew together. And the girl realized that her former comrade liked her, but he was like a younger brother for her. And considering that they would soon become relatives, then it was better for him to throw out all the strange thoughts from his head. After this statement, Sinwan felt rather strange. Continuing the dialogue, Van Zhu explained that if people learn about all this, then the reputation of Shinvan will suffer a lot, and indeed such speeches contradict the standards of decency. Turning around, the guy smiled and asked if Van Zhu really thinks that he likes her. As a comfort for the girl, the young man told her to go and look at herself in the mirror, since her appearance clearly worsened over the years. The displeased girl asked to repeat this statement because she heard poorly. Laughing, Sinwan asked her to think about whom she would meet, because when they were still small, their entertainment was to poke with sticks in the cow, and her friend was simple, but now she dressed outright clothes and picked up a rich guy. He sighed heavily. The young man remembered that Van Zhu had spontaneously spit who was rich and who was poor, because she was welcoming with everyone and communicated very good-naturedly with everyone. The girl understood why her comrade was saying such things, because he was angry that he could not get her, and the fact that she did not agree to become his girlfriend, but offered to leave insults in the past because soon they would become relatives, because of which there should be no quarrels between them. Such a statement shocked the protagonist in shock, because he had never heard this before. Turning around, Sinwan only exclaimed that his girl was clearly crazy, and she does not understand what she was saying. But the girl was not going to stop there. She ordered the guy to look at her uncle, because he was able to achieve a lot in life, and Sinwan did not achieve anything. According to the lady, the guy's life was like in a joke, because he tramples like a damn penny, and the sense of this is zero, because once he studied there somewhere, but did not even work in his specialty. The arrogant girl also began to mock the guy due to the fact that his mother is in the hospital, and treatment costs a lot of money, can reach 50,000 yuan. The displeased young man stopped her and decided to find out if she told him everything, and ordered not to build a princess out of himself when she is actually a toad. It was not worth thinking that the new hubby had at least some business for her, and the hero asked to hold his pride for more suitable people. Such an answer was even more angry with a red-haired girl, and she did not even know what to answer. However, Sinwan was ready to listen to her forever, and added that he was really not as rich as his uncle, but he was very hardworking and is ready to make a lot of efforts to achieve his goals. Suddenly, the system praised the boy, saying that he was really incredible, and without the slightest delay decided to take and abandon his love, which he was familiar from childhood. As a reward for this, he received at home, under demolition in his city. Unfortunately, Sinwon did not immediately understand what it was at all, and why the houses should be demolished. Due to such bad behavior on the part of his friend, the young man decided to act and grabbed the girl by the hand. Soon after, the guy exclaimed that people with her husband should sit either under the castle or in general in prison, after which he said goodbye. A calm hero walked along the streets of his old city, but a car began to drive behind at great speed. Some kind of dried in a car drove incredibly close to the guy, because of which he sprayed him with mud. Because of this, the car stopped in order to look at the poor fellow who was stained. As it turned out, the son of Uncle Shinvan was driving in this car. He stopped to apologize because he was in a hurry to work, and did not even notice the pedestrian. The arrogant man said that he works as a contractor in the city update management and is busy with important matters. For example, the construction of roads, so he will not be able to help with cleaning clothes, unfortunately. Laughing, the son of Uncle also recalled that if the guy needs a part-time job, he could come to him and will help to carry bricks. The main character at that moment only thought that it was really not surprising that the road looks in this way, and the son's son is growing a very talented entrepreneur. The decisively tuned young man realized that in this case, he would provide all local residents with one tiny service. Sometime later, events continued to take place in the building of the branch of the city update. A friendly builder greeted Mr. Khan and was glad that he decided to look at them. He began to leave the building. The guy only exclaimed that he was glad to see his old acquaintances. Suddenly, the system praised its master again, because due to the fact that he decided to spend his money on the development of his city, as a reward he received 100 books. Such a number of books, of course, shocked the protagonist, because the system made this decision automatically based on his behavior. Nevertheless, the guy did not blame the system because he understood that the books would really not interfere with him. With a sigh, the young man looked at the sky, because recently the system threw him awards to the whole country and slimmer. He even had such a feeling that soon all the wealth of the world could be in his hands. A few days later, events continued to take place in a hospital. Sinwon came to visit his mother and helped her, doing everything possible. A few minutes later, the doctor entered the ward and explained that judging by the results of the tests, the operation was successful, so that the patient was not worth linger, and the doctor ordered her things to be collected. But the young man was outraged, since his mother's were performed only yesterday. She was still restored, and the extract occurs too early. Moreover, their family fully paid for all medical services. The unflappable doctor did not react at all to this statement, and said that he seemed to be mistaken, and wanted to say that the patient had already been discharged. And looking at the nurses, the head doctor ordered them to help collect the patients of the patient. Getting a knife, Sinwon looked maliciously at two girls, and decided to clarify with the doctor what he says. The excited mother continued to observe the whole situation, and absolutely did not understand how to act in this case. Eviling, the man exclaimed that he would not change his decision. Sinvan's mother is completely healthy. If anything, they have other patients who also need medical care, and even urgent. Due to a waste of time, others may die. The main character did not like all this, but he still decided to put the knife that was in his hand. As soon as the young man laid the knife, the doctor noticed that he had a cold weapon in his hands and threatened to cause guard. Mom began to convince her son that she really feels better and should not spend more money on treatment, and the doctor said that she was already healthy. Smiling, a malicious doctor explained that the guy's mother really agrees, and a good son should always obey his parents. Looking at the nurses, the doctor also ordered them to collect all the things so that other patients who came to this chamber would not suspect that some poor were treated here. Soon, as if nothing had happened, the impudent began to leave, but the hero clenched his fist and was not going to endure it just like that. Grounding his teeth, the young man asked his mother to clean the apples on his own, and at the same time he would call Dad to come and take her. But the Xinwan at that moment needs to deal with some matters. Turning around, the guy smiled and convinced his mother that everything would be fine. A few minutes later, the events continued to take place in the doctor's office, where the doctor was talking with someone on the phone and said that other people could already come, since the chamber was free. But still, the doctor asked to be more careful because even if it is the usual stretch of the foot, it will take at least 3 months to make sure that the treatment was successful. As it turned out, it was directly called by the son of Uncle, who specifically drove the mother of Jinven so that she would no longer be treated in the hospital. The doctor was ready to say for the money that the guy was simply incomparable because his generosity did not know the boundaries. And this poor man Sinwon was simply a miserable insignificance. Even he could only make payment for surgery and treatment thanks to their family. Laughing, the guy explained that he certainly would not want to worry the doctor for such trifles, but he was still glad that they managed to find a common language. The malicious warning at that moment only thought that he would see how Sinwon would cope with difficulties on its territory. As soon as the sales doctor received a bribe for his actions, he was immediately happy because his affairs went uphill. Watching everything that was happening, the main character immediately realized that all this was done only for the sake of a bribe, but the money for him was now not a problem. In fact, for the sake of money, the whole world was spinning. Sinwon was now incredibly rich and could afford to do anything. After a few hours, the events continued to take place in the office of the director of the hospital. Someone knocked on the doorbell. As it turned out, this was the main character who decided to visit the director directly. The young man explained that he was simply an ordinary patient of their hospital and came on a visit to an influential man. The director turned to a young man, saying that if he was ill, then it is better to go to the doctor, because here he does not accept patients. However, the guy wanted to talk directly with Mr. Director because Sinwon wanted to transfer an additional building to the hospital. But the man did not believe in these words and exclaimed that if the young man has nothing to do, then he should approach the consultation window, because there they would explain everything there. The director had enough things to do, and the hero was ordered to leave the office. After thinking a little, the man came to his senses and still realized that he was now offering a whole building as a gift. The shocked director decided to clarify with the boy if he knows at all how much this building costs. Looking at this guy, an elderly man understood that he was miserable, looked like a poor man. His clothes were probably not worth a 200 wen, but he wanted to sacrifice a whole building to the hospital. It was more like a joke. The joyful hero exclaimed that of course he knew how much the building costs, but he asked not to worry about this because it cost about 1,000,000 yuan to repair the building. And today, these are mere trifles with the current savings. The guy explained that the chambers in the hospital are very often crowded because various patients with diseases come to them and sometimes even in a very critical condition. So he would like to sacrifice an additional building. However, the man still did not believe that it would really be possible because Sinwon looked very poor. The hero was well aware that there are not enough space in the wards. Because of this problem, some doctors begin to use their position and take bribes, asking to free already occupied beds, supposedly in order to find a place for other patients. Hearing this, an elderly man began to claim that he has been working as the director of this hospital for more than 10 years. And they never had such a thing that their workers took bribes because doctors should save lives. It was then that Sinwon said that his mother had carried away a serious operation yesterday. She should be thoroughly supervised, but today for some reason her attending physician declares that she needs to leave the ward. The director denied everything, saying that this is a guy's inventions because in their wards it is cramped and many people cannot be fitted at the same time. But to write a person almost immediately after the operation, this is simply impossible. Seeing the rage, the director shouted that he did not believe any of his words and ordered to tell the truth, otherwise he simply would not listen. The smart guy made a record and intentionally turned it on in order to show how the doctor acted with the patient. Turning on the recorder, the director began to listen to the very fatal record in which there was all the evidence. Hearing a record with evidence, the man began to deny, and they say that perhaps the recording was edited or forged. The hero even thought that perhaps everyone here is behind each other and hide behind because of bribes. Sinwon still said that the director could assume that this is a fake record, and he would really sacrifice the building. Having called the old acquaintance, the hero said that he wants to repair the building for their district hospital and clarified if Mr. Kang has time for this project. Fortunately, a friend really had a lot of time, which is why it was possible to discuss additional information with the director, and Kang should soon arrive. Having finished the conversation, the young man smiled and said that this time the director should definitely believe and suggested talking personally with his acquaintance. The guy begged the director not to be so stubborn because the dialogue will not take more than a few minutes, and he will also be able to make sure and get a new building for the hospital. A little dumbfounded director still took the phone in order to talk to a strange stranger. Starting the dialogue, the man introduced himself as a director from the district hospital. Hearing a businessman, an elderly man immediately realized that it really was Mr. Kang's voice. He, in turn, said that the hospital was really lucky because the building was free. The dumbfounded director literally cried out with happiness. and said that he understood everything, after which he decided to finish the dialogue. So he realized that this young man really did not lie to him. Sometime later, they again spoke about that strange situation, and Sinwon made it clear that his intention was really very serious. But the director still claimed that the only recording of the conversation was not enough. After a little thought, the young man suggested that there would be little one for the hospital, and it may be worth adding a few more. Nevertheless, the young man decided to leave. But in the end, he said that he no longer had any wishes, but only asked to deal with unscrupulous doctors because people like them should be severely punished. Having stopped the guy, the man still decided to clarify his name, because he did not even know his name. Turning his head, Sinwon explained that he was just an ordinary child from a simple and poor family who seeks to protect the interests of patients, and his name does not matter in this situation. But if the director needs to somehow call the guy, then he asked him to call him a messenger of justice. The door closed, and the stunned director continued to stand as if dead, not understanding how to react to this situation. A few minutes later, the man nevertheless decided to act and picked up the phone to do something. The seriously configured director ordered him to urgently provide him with the last lists of patients prescribed after surgery. Meanwhile, in the daily hospital, the nurse turned to the doctor, saying that the director was already waiting for him at the entrance to the ward. After just a few minutes, the doctor himself was already on his knees. I begged the master not to fire him, because he needs to feed a large family, and he could not lose his job. The director was adamant, because the doctor thought about his family, but there is no about the patient's family. The doctor, like him, disgraced their profession, and the man no longer wanted to risk the hospital's reputation. Thus, the events continued to take place the next day in the house of Uncle Sinwon, where his future wife made a massage to that guy. However, a certain young man burst into the room who was clearly dissatisfied. The guy was very angry, saying that his comrade was supposed to bribe a doctor in the hospital, but his wife was thrown out of the ward. She was literally pushed out of the hospital. Now she was so angry that she didn't even want to let him go home. Such a turn of events caused a guy a shock because he thought that he had discussed everything with a doctor, and there was no problem to arise. Asking to wait, the man began to make excuses because he thought that he was perhaps mixed up, and now he would call and find out everything. Having called the number of the same doctor, it turned out that the recruited number was unavailable, which caused severe stress in the dude. At the same time, events took place in the house of the protagonist, where the workers began to ship a large number of boxes. Mom was shocked by such behavior on the part of her son, since he hired a nurse for her and bought all the necessary equipment. Sinwon, in turn, reassured her, saying that the hospital organized it all for free. Fortunately, my mother believed her son, but the young man at that moment wanted to be like a philanthropist and was going to do good deeds disinterestedly, not receiving gratitude for them. At that very moment near the hero's house, someone screamed, accusing him that he was a bad person. As it turned out, the son of uncle specifically for his friend agreed to buy a ward in the hospital for almost 10,000 yen. But now everything is lost because of him. The displeased woman did not understand what Han Dakai was talking about because she was not aware of his about affairs. However, the young man at that moment realized that the displeased man said in vain about it. Taking strong anger, Sinwon began to scream at Kan Dakai, saying that it was because of him that his mother was decided to literally drive out of the hospital, and now he still spent more than 10,000 on it. A relative from him is clearly not very good. Feeling awkwardly, the guy began to make excuses, saying that he had nothing to do with it, and the woman should not have been expelled from the hospital, especially if she had just undergone surgery. And in general, Kan Dakai did not ask not to translate the topic, because he knew that Sinwon stood behind all this. The hospital would not just have a nurse for his mother, but the hero explained that the director instructed to do it. Uncle's son did not believe in all the stories of the guy because he was turning all this for his dear acquaintance. And thanks to him, he became the head of the repair of roads. And thanks to him, he was able to get into the organization. Laughing, the hero remembered that Kan Dakai actually earns a lot of money, and even a few million could come out in a year. And at the same time, he dares to come here and accuse him of some nonsense, and also demand money from a poor family. The blonde decided to tell that he earns 5,000 yen a month, and should be subtracted from this amount that he pays for renting a small room, and the money that he spends on food, and then should be compared with the income of Kan Dakai, who lives in a huge house. Turning around, Sinwon even began to leave, because he no longer wanted to communicate with his dissatisfied relative, telling his mother that he should not continue, In his opinion, some people were so mired in their greedy vices that they managed to forget that in the world they decide everything, not money, and justice still exists. Bushing because of the defeat, Khan Dakai began to leave, finally saying that Sinwan and his family are insignificant poor. A smart guy at that moment only thought that his relative is a stupid fool. A little offended mother nevertheless decided to find out from her son if Han Dakai was going to take revenge on them because of the far-fetched nonsense. But Sinwan did not care about it. In fact, it was even interesting for him to see how a relative was going to take revenge. Meanwhile, somewhere nearby, the car of the uncle's son was driving at a huge speed. Looking at the car that he was driving in the oncoming lane, Khan Dakai noticed that the car was like a Kanga car. But he was likely to make a mistake, because there was no need to drive into this outback. The SUV really came to the house of the protagonist and stopped right at the entrance. A benevolent man greeted Mr. Sinwan and thanked for help with the road because of the buildings that were restored for free. Taking a feeling of awkwardness, the young man began improvisation and exclaimed that Mr. Kang had arrived so unexpectedly and decided to thank them, but said that he should not do this because he just helped to fix the car when it broke. Starting to play along with the guy, Kang agreed, because he really came to discuss the repair of the road in front of the house. The man realized that Sinwan hid his affairs even from his parents. Mother still did not understand what was happening, but her son smiled politely and said that he and the master would need to discuss something. Moving a little, the guy explained that the next time he would come to the city and would stay in the shade because he did not want one of his relatives to find out what he was actually doing. Kang also said that what Sinwan was already ready to prepare him for today, the man's effectiveness really knew no boundaries. Meanwhile, Khan Duck someone called and announced that he would no longer be engaged in the road repair. Such a statement shocked the guy because it was his only earnings, and he did not receive more money. Due to the information heard, the displeased dude immediately began to frantically slow down, clamping the brake pedal with all its strength. The machine began to brake in an instant, which is why stripes from tire braking appeared on the asphalt. Trying to find out what was the matter, the guy was as polite as possible, because he had already hired workers, and he paid them in advance. They were about to replace. But his chief dumbfounded him like this. The boss explained that now construction companies have new rules. Each team should comply with the norms and standards. It will be, to put it mildly, it is not very convenient if their employees do not comply with all this. Soon after, the man simply hung up, thereby announcing Khan Dakai with an unemployed loser. Taking strong stress, the guy even dropped the phone and spoke the word no more than dozens of times. As it turned out, the boss really could not do anything in this situation because he could not disobey Mr. Kang. A few days later, events continued to take place in the club, where Khan Dakai wanted to give a gift to his boss. The man pretended that he knew nothing, while being in the company of two beauties and hugging them. The guy put the package on the table and said that the profit of the boss in cooperation could increase from 30 to 40%. It seemed that these words really touched the man, and probably he even thought, the arrogant guy thought that the boss did not suit small interest. The man was really very greedy, and probably this was a trick from the very beginning to take more money from him. Smiling, Khan Dakai explained that they knew very well that these very building standards and standards for firms are just a tinsel, and even if he can't go through the first time, he will be able to make another company and try to pass again. At that very moment, and the boss was angry and shouted that no one dared to deceive their system and fake documents. He was not going to turn illegal carts for mere pennies, and ordered to find a poor man who would agree for this amount. The frightened guy explained that in fact he did not mean this, but the boss decided to clarify what exactly they wanted to say, because it was clear that the guy was giving the back. Trying to justify himself, the guy wanted to meet on a deal, and offered as many as 50% of the revenue. Fighting, the man shouted that he considered Khan Dakai almost his brother, but he decided to substitute him like that, and now he was simply expelled from the club. Even several bald guards came, and they literally pushed the Khan Ducky from the VIP zone, thereby humiliating him even more. In the same nightclub, but already in another room, someone knocked on the door. As it turned out, the same boss decided to visit some. It was clear that he was rather polite with strangers. It turned out that in the club, but in another room, sat Sinwan and his new comrade, Mr. Kang. Having greeted the protagonist, the man from the whole heart and on behalf of all the inhabitants of their city wanted to bring great gratitude for the money spent for the repair of the road. Looking at this man, the young man immediately realized that he was a traitor and a speculator, since the boss was very two-faced. However, Sinwan nevertheless explained that he would like all this between them. Just his parents are already at old age and their legs often hurt. In their years, they already stopped paying attention to the fact that they're with the road. Laughing and looking at the boss, the hero also decided to clarify whether the road would break a year after the repair. Such a question really forced the boss to be nervous, but he said that this could not be. He suffered humiliation because the guy was very rich. Thus, the man promised to build the best road. And Sinwan now counted on him because he did not want to be disappointed. Thanks to his actions, the system praised the guy for the fact that in 2 days, he managed to solve the problem with the repair of roads and the rebuilding of unfinished houses, which is why he was given 9,909,999 yuan. Meanwhile, the events continued to take place in the house of Uncle Sinwan. There, someone shouted. These cries were heard even from the yard. As it turned out, it was a girl, Kai. She really did not like that the guy was sitting on the phone all the time and stuck. He didn't wash the floor in the whole day. He didn't pass his clothes and did nothing at all. If the girl would have found out that Dakayu just boasted, and all his projects and work are just a blatant lie, then I would not choose him, but Shinvana, because he at least worked in the city, and there are definitely prospects. These words really touched the guy. He immediately got up and was clearly very angry. That's just red-haired. But it was completely all the same. She continued to call the Duckle Khan useless because even from the stone there would be more benefit than from him. If she was in the place of her boyfriend, she would kneel before Mr. Zhao and would ask to return the work. Turning around, the girl threatened to go to Sinwan because he loved her since childhood, and in any way she would agree to be with her. Unable to withstand such a shame, Khan Dakai caught up with the girl and grabbed her neck. Due to severe stress and anger, he literally pushed her away, because of which the lady began to fall to the floor. Khan Dakai shouted that she had not earned anything, so now he also presents him for money. Meanwhile, the parents of the protagonist read a certain agreement on the construction of roads, where something was indicated by small print. After reading the contract, unfortunately the parents did not understand its essence and asked for an explanation. Kang explained that the construction of the road will pass through their land and will take an area of no more than 1 square meter of land. As a sign of compensation for the damage provided to them, the company can build a house for them. These words really shocked the parents of Sinvan. They fell into a stupor and did not even know how to react to this. A benevolent man even said that if a couple does not agree or is unacceptable for them, they can discuss other conditions of compensation with them, and perhaps monetary compensation would have approached them. While shocked, the parents did not understand since when well-being came to their village, because they could build a house for some kind of square meter, so there is also no need to pay for it. For them, it was real luck. And the father of the family even began to call his son, shouting to him that they would now build a new house. A few days later, the event continued to take place in the passenger terminal of the bus station. The main character already needed to return to the city. His parents told him that life would always be difficult there, and asked not to forget to take care of themselves, as well as about their health. Sinwan convinced his parents that he should not worry about him, because he would definitely take care of himself. And now he should go to the bus, because he would be late and will not have time to the airport. Joyful parents said goodbye to their son and exclaimed that they would wait for him yet. Some time later, the boy found himself in the waiting room of the first class. He was very lucky. He visited his parents, and also to earn extra money. At that very moment, an unremarkable boy was noticed by a staggering beauty who turned to him. It was Gao Wen. The young man explained that he went home in order to visit his mother and dad. Feeling awkwardness, the lady explained to you that she had forgotten to ask the guy about it and only then found out that her mother fell ill, because of which Gao suggested that her comrade quit precisely because of this. In fact, nothing serious happened, and my mother is already fine, and the treatment went successfully. As it turned out, the company asked Gao Wen to open itself from a new side and tried to change the image, and also asked to hold an advertising campaign to support rural areas and different villages. This coincidence was really very pleasant. Even the hero noticed it. Since the young man quit, Gao Wen wanted to know what further plans he had, because perhaps he submitted a statement to some new company. However, the girl also suggested that perhaps the guy would not want to talk about it, and said that there was nothing like that. Smiling, the young man explained that in fact he had nothing to talk about. He does not plan to settle anywhere yet, and perhaps on the contrary, he will open his business. A smart hero even wanted to specially buy a building opposite the place where he used to work, so that his former leadership was struck every time they see him. A courteous girl said that if Xinwan needs help, then she can help something. Besides, she has a lot of business acquaintances from their sphere, which can also help. Suddenly, someone called a girl on a mobile phone, and she was excommunicated to answer the call. During the phone call, some guy said that Gao Wen was able to earn a lot of money and should immediately pick up the phone as soon as she was called, because people have been waiting for her in a direct broadcast for half an hour, and you need to touch it. Feeling awkwardness, Gao Wen began to make excuses, saying that an hour ago she already said that she was sitting down on an airplane, and the manager answered her that everything was in order. But he, in turn, told her to sell tickets for the plane and launched a stream immediately. Unfortunately, the aircraft is about to fly out. And if it passes tickets, then the next flight will be only after 10 hours and not the fact that it can buy tickets. The bastard was all the same because it is impossible to refuse their area, and the company will not give a girl the opportunity to ride on airplanes for free. According to the manager, there is nothing to worry about to wait at the airport 10 hours until the next flight. But miss the audience and lose the audience expensive. It was then that the girl was beaten out, and she began to shout that for 6 months she was in the company's ranking on the very first line and earned a bunch of money. So it should not be said that she was an overlap and just spends the company's money. Remembering the dialogue near the club, the man said that you should not forget that Gao Wen's contract is still valid. So if she does not want to get into trouble, then he should do as he would say. Hearing this dialogue, the protagonist immediately realized that it was the manager of He Shui. The villain heard on the background of Xinvan. In his opinion, it was now not surprising why Gao Wen was inconvenient to conduct a stream. Hearing this, the shocked girl exclaimed that it was nonsense, and she recently threw up photos of her tickets in one direction and the other. Thus, the manager manipulated the streamer, telling her that she can easily prove it live, and at the same time she will be able to see whether she is at the airport. These manipulations simply brought the girl to hysteria. She wanted to get rid of this manager, but could not do it due to the fact that she still had a contract. Suddenly, Xinwan decided to grab the phone from the girl in order to say a couple of affectionate words to a man. A smart young man said that since this is already a violation of the contract, he would pay a fine instead of Gao Wen, and he doesn't care about the amount. And by the way, the hero also did not forget to mention that this conversation was completely recorded, and he has every right to sue the manager for slander. These words only made fun of the manager, because he could not believe that a poor guy could afford to pay for a violation of the contract. Xinwan was also a difficult guy, and he hung up because he clearly did not like to talk to such a bastard. Not understanding how it was possible, her friend considered that Xinwan was just joked, that you would pay a fine, because there was just an unhealthy amount. However, at that moment, the girl only thought about whether she really deserved to provide such support. In fact, Gao Wen held a good position in the company, and the manager only occasionally caused her troubles, so there is no point in getting involved in this, and the amount for violations and will not require a huge one. The guy began to convince his girlfriend that he should not worry about it. Besides, he did it more for himself. The young man was going to open his media company. Just through the road he would buy an office to clearly show who is better here, and just for this he was looking for friends who would help him with this business. Yes, and what could be better for a novice business than to steal his main star from a competitor? Gao Wen did not immediately believe that a comrade could create a company to compete with media giants. A shocked lady could not even imagine who this Xinwan really was. The future entrepreneur decided to propose the work of Gao Wen. If she does not want to stay in his company, that is such an option. Half of her income goes to pay off the forfeit under the contract, and she will take the other half after the debt will be paid. They will be paid. Divide profit 70 by 30, 70% of the streamer, 30% to him. The proposal was really quite generous. Gao Wen even blushed a little from this. Smiling maliciously, the guy even suggested increasing the share for the model, so that she would definitely agree. But Gao succeeded. According to the streamers, the interest was too much, and she said that it was not worth doing such a seigi. The interest ratio is good, so Xinwan also proposed to pay a penalty for violation of the contract. In fact, for such conditions, it should have been offered a maximum of 20 or 30%. In fact, the protagonist understood that Gao Wen was the only person in the company who did not look down on him, and he wanted to pay off for kindness, because few could look at other people as an equal to himself. Not to mention the fact that during his work he learned to understand the characters of people well, and looking at Gao, he was sure that she had a great future. The young man guaranteed that a friend would earn so much money that she is not a stable under the contract will seem to her a mushroom trifle. and if it is more convenient, she can assume that Sinwon paid her a salary a few months ahead. Such a proposal was even more touched by a friend. She did not even know what would answer, and just blushing, she decided to shut up, thinking her galloped, because it was obvious that Sinwon extends her hand to help. But he made everything to sound as if she was helping him, and not him to her. Nevertheless, the proposal was really excellent, which is why the young Stremersha happily agreed. Some time later, events continued to take place in the office, namely, inside the office of the Media Group company. As it turned out, the protagonist and his friend decided to show himself directly to the manager that he was clearly not happy about this. The manager began to scream, saying that Sinwon hung noodles on the ears of Gao Wen while they talked there at the airport. If the girl really bought his tricks and decided to bring him to the company thinking that he could pay, then she clearly has no brains. Having looked at the manager onto the manager, the young man began to repeat the commas so that he sometimes finished nonsense and called the lawyers. Because Shinvan did not have time to listen to his nonsense. Because he came here only to free Gao Wen from the slave contract that they pressed her. Having risen from its workplace, the world calls confirmed that the penalty will cost a tidy sum, and the guy's money is clearly not enough for this. Although the rumors reached an influential man that the supposedly Sinwon got rich, but still he would definitely not have enough money for it. The malicious man explained that when a huge amount of money is falling into the poor and not abruptly losing his head, and as his former boss, he wanted to give one advice, that luck is like a cardboard house you will blow, and he would immediately fall apart. So if Sinwon took money from someone to show off, then at one point he will not have time to come to his senses, as his debts will be bent in a heap. The young man was clearly vile to be in the same room with this villain, but he still said that the money is a renewable resource, and the more it is to spend, the more they would return to the person. And judging by the expression of the manager's face, it seems that he is really afraid that he will be able to take from Gao Wen. Hearing this statement, the villain immediately began to tremble with fear, as if he had just dawned on him that this was not a joke. However, the wretch explained that it was not he who owns the company, and he has nothing to fear about, and he will take this streamers on his side or not. But Sinwon realized that Shuya had, due to the fact that there was so much power, he always tries to make people do strange and sometimes terrible things. The guys were very disturbed by what future the enemy was prepared. Starting to aggress, the manager could not stand it and shouted that no one dares to look down on him, because Sinwon had previously subordinated like a dog. The young man decided to recall that he had a contract through an employment contract. So if the manager calls him a dog, this is an insult, which is why he can sue him. Also, in the 5th paragraph of the contract, it was stated that there should not be the distribution of the false or defamatory part of the information about the employee. Even after the termination of this contract, a few hours later, the events continued to take place in the conference of the hall, where the contracts were issued between the Stripple and the company, and they only had to be signed. It was evident that Gao Wen had a strong fear, but she still agreed to sign the contract. The manager sincerely did not believe that Gao Wen would simply take and leave the company, because she literally signed for the sake of some kind of kid on whom luck suddenly fell and a lot of money. Having angered even more, the lady said that she did not need to worry about her, because now she decides for herself. Thus, the contract was successfully signed, and now Gao Wen is officially not an employee of the company. The arrogant man nevertheless decided to find out exactly when to pay for the penalty under the terminated contract, because Sinwon would not force Gao Wen to sign this contract in order to leave it with a bunch of debts. Only the contract was terminated, and the hero noticed that the manager was already in a hurry somewhere, and it was not worth worrying, because he had already transferred the money to the account. Several tens of millions of yuan in an instant were transferred to the company's account, and Sinwon ordered the bastard to check the accounting department. At that very moment, the hero decided to look out the window and noticed that it was really good from here. It was high, and the style of the building is not bad. Turning around, the young man turned to Mr. Ho, saying that he would like to discuss some details. The dream of taking revenge on the former company was successfully implemented. For this system awarded the young man and gave him as many as 99 million yuan. Going out into the street, someone began to scream the companies of 2 friends, thereby stopping them. It turned out that it was Zhang Xinxin. She was very happy about such an unusual coincidence. A little upset, her friend noticed that she had heard that Gao Wen quit, and Zhang suggested that because of this they could never see herself again. Taking awkwardness, the friend of course wanted to answer this question, but Sinwon did not quite understand his meaning. Pointing a finger at the next edition, The young man exclaimed that their office is in this building, so at any moment they can come and have lunch together. This event became a turning point. Zhang Xinxin was numb from shock and did not know how to react to such a statement. Suddenly, someone called the boy on a mobile phone, and he said that he had to answer. It turned out that Li Vanya called, and probably this call was very important. The man called regarding real estate documents. They were already ready, and he decided to find out from Xinvan when he could come after them. Fortunately, he will soon be able to pick up the necessary papers. Since the hero has returned here, with these matters he completely forgot that he had his own house, and this amused him. Explaining to the friend that they had already figured out the affairs, Gao Wen could now relax, and Xinwan will go somewhere at that time in order to solve the remaining issues. In general, the new employee of the company was not opposed, and happily agreed. Communicating with her girlfriend, Gao Wen said that Xinwan proposed compensating for a contract under the contract, so now she really does not work in a last company. It was really unusual. The redhead did not expect that the boy who used to work in the office and was on the run at one point would become a rich man. It seems that it really should not be judged by the book on the cover. In one of the city companies, they discussed that today one very important client was supposed to come, so it was necessary to behave appropriately to his status. The manager explained that it is necessary to make every effort in order not to disappoint the very client. The fair-haired man agreed with the mistress and was going to do everything in the best possible way. The challenge of all subordinates, the man explained that Mr. Khan, who bought a mansion from them, would soon be here, so it is necessary to go to the front door and greet it properly. Only before this it is necessary to put himself in order and make sure that their form looks neat and accurately and worthy. It was the company's honorary client, so it was impossible to neglect them. A little alarmed girl asked the manager to give a client's photo so that they certainly would not be mistaken and would not confuse him with anyone else. However, the man only smiled because the same rich man was a mysterious financial tycoon, and they do not have his photographs, but usually such people like to brag about their money, so they will not confuse such a bright personality. Sometime later, the manager ordered to get out in the office so that there was not a dust, because he wanted their dear customers to not feel inconvenience. Meanwhile, a taxi of economy class drove up to the building. It was unremarkable. That's just that in this taxi was the very rich peasant who came out in order to conclude another deal. Looking at the central entrance to the company, the young man understood why she was the first in the list of the best real estate companies. Looking at one of the guards, Xinwan did not understand who these people were waiting for. Probably some former bump. As if nothing had happened, the guy went into the office because he still needed to get to the reception. The company's office was really very large, but no one was nearby. No one approached Xinwan. The hero could not believe that all the employees went out into the street. Looking at the layout, he saw that there are a lot of trees and herbs on the territory of the villa, and there was a pool next to the house, which was designed by a famous designer. Meanwhile, a kind girl came up to him, who greeted him, and decided to clarify if the master wanted to see the apartment. At that very moment, the chief manager asked Irene to approach him, probably in some very important matter. As it turned out, the man said the ward that today they did not accept other customers, and did not understand why Irene was generally standing at the central entrance. Taking strong anger, the boss was against serving ordinary people because the most important client was supposed to come, and he should not have thought that they did not respect him and did not pay due attention. Realizing her case, Irene continued to repeat that the very thing was their fault, since they did not hang the sign, that today was closed. The manager still stood on his own and said that the girl was too stupid, because of which he would figure it out. The client did not even have 200 yuan in his pocket, and it is completely incomprehensible how he dared to come to their office. The manager believed that such a dysfunctional client would interfere with their expensive client. Staying closer, the man claimed that some people who could not afford something like to come and go to the impudent look at it, distracting workers from business, and if the guest wants to get something, then there is nothing to pull with it, because otherwise, there is no point in standing for a long time here. Hearing such a strange replica, the main character decided to ask again if they really tell him. Having called Irene, the chief manager ordered her to get out of this building as soon as possible, and at the same time expel the dysfunctional client, since the rich man had to come soon. For the guy, such a strange statement was quite shocking, because he did not even have time to see his apartment, but he was already expelled. The scoundrel did not hide his hostility, and exclaimed that the guy clearly did not even have hundreds of yuan in his pocket, and in their homes the cost of 1 square meter cost 300,000 yuan. Xinwan was outraged to the limit. He shouted that the level of handling of customers in this organization was left to be desired, and managers look high at the most ordinary buyers. As it turned out, the man did not care about it because in his opinion, the guy could not afford to buy housing here. The decisively tuned guy heard a call. Probably he was just called in the case of buying property. It really was so. A representative of the company who specified whether he came to their office and asked to address any questions to their manager. At that very moment, the same dysfunctional manager heard a familiar voice in a telephone conversation. It was his director. Smiling, the guy exclaimed the director that the manager of this company told him that he was insignificant and not worthy to buy a house from them. Sinwon after this thinks that he would cancel the deal and buy a mansion about some other company. Such an unfavorable event caused an immediate reaction from the director. The girl literally begged him to wait because she was immediately going to come to the office. In her opinion, this was some kind of misunderstanding, because of which she immediately rushed straight to the epicenter of events in order to understand what was the matter. Leaving the building, the director ordered the driver to take her to the sales department, but do it as soon as possible. The car began to go at an incredible speed. It was a business-class taxi with a personal driver. The displeased girl did not understand what was the matter, because the manager was warned that a very important guest would come today. And God forbid this rich man will hide the grudge against their company. Literally a few minutes later, the director already wanted to arrive straight to the building and was going to quickly figure it out. However, at the moment in the building, there was only a dysfunctional manager who smiled like a fool and did not understand what to do. Turning around, the man continued to be firmly that Sinwon should get out of here as soon as possible, because there should be the same rich man that they entertained all the mob here. At that moment, the heroes realized that judging by the face of this man, he probably made a mistake when he thought that he had heard from his phone call the voice of his boss. Having taken Irene's ear, the manager began to shout to her that her sweet appearance does not mean anything, and it is not enough for work to just look like a cutie. It is because of her they had problems with clients, and because of her that mysterious rich man was offended. To rake now, it is the manager. Trying to justify herself, the girl began to cry. She told Van that she was just doing her job and did nothing bad. Standing even closer to Shinvon, the manager pushed him and called him poverty, after which he ordered to fail from here as soon as possible until he received the ridge. Meanwhile, the director of the company finally arrived at the office and immediately turned to manager Van. The angry scoundrel continued to approve the guy to get out as soon as possible, since the director had already come. Smiling at a smiling, the blonde explained to the latter that there was a little misunderstanding here. However, the woman did not care about this. She passed the dysfunctional manager and headed for the very poor man. At that moment, the man thought that the director was furious due to the fact that this poor kid was still here. Suddenly, the lady leaned in front of the guest and introduced herself as Vanine. She was the vice president of the company, but Sinwon can call her just Lee. Feeling awkwardness, the girls were very sorry that their company could not give the guy a positive experience of communicating with their employees. The manager Van most likely simply did not recognize him, so the vice president apologized if the manager's words offended the guest. Such a turn of events made the manager freeze in place, because he did not know how to react to something like that, and was simply in shock. Looking at the guy that he looked like a poor man, Van would never have believed in his life that the guest is a multimillionaire. The vice president promised that in the future, they would certainly improve the approach to absolutely any customers, and would not allow their employees to have the arrogance of behaving in this way. At the same moment, Irene realized that this guy is the very rich man they were waiting. It was their VIP client. Lee continued to say that in fact they are equally treated to all customers, without exception, and it doesn't matter if they come simply to see or decided that they would already buy real estate from them. The dumbfounded Van looked at the guy and realized that this was the same mysterious rich man who wanted to buy real estate from them for frantic money. But he looked like an ordinary ragged man. Turning to the manager, the vice president began to reproach him for telling him hundreds of times that it was impossible to underestimate customers. But Van never listened to her. Dragged from fear and shame, the man understood that now his career would definitely come to the end. Having angered even more on a man, the lady said that he was not better than others since she was selling expensive apartments. Pointing her finger straight to Van, Lee shouted that he was officially fired from tomorrow. Starting to cry, he tried to persuade him not to dismiss him, because he was sincerely sorry that he had done so. Having fallen to his knees, Van brazenly tried to beg for forgiveness. Thereby, he tried to stay in position. The villain claimed that he has a large family, a mortgage, a loan for a car, a sick daughter who needs to buy expensive medicines every month. The vice president really knew about all this, and Van continued to beg her not to take his job. However, the man was aware of the rules of the company but still entered his own way because they are doing business here, and they have their own norms, which is why Van would haunt for his behavior. Stepping closer to the main character, the man began to beg and take pity on him because he pleaded his guilt and asked him to give him another chance. The frightened girl trembled with fear and thought that perhaps she would be the next, because of which she did not understand what to do. Suddenly, a benevolent guy exclaimed that Irene is a good girl and she should make her a new manager, whether it was not a problem. And since they solved everything, then it is possible to look at the future house of Mr. Sinvan. Such an unusual statement was even more shocked by Van, because more recently he ruled Irene, and now he is essentially unemployed. But she is a manager of a large company. Meanwhile, Sinwan explained that he did not have much time, and clarified whether they had time to inspect the mansion. Lee happily agreed to help with the inspection, and also offered to give up the buyer. Brooded, the girl did not believe what she heard, because she did not expect that she would be raised so quickly, because she recently got a job in this company. As it turned out, the system noticed the wig of the protagonist. He behaved bravely like a real knight, which is why he was given a heart. A reward in the form of a heart is a personal praise from the system, and it was not worth underestimating this because perhaps such praise once can help at some very critical moment. Sometime later, Kamas's events continued to occur in the courtyard, which led to the entrance to the mansion. People standing nearby had to work this mansion, and the security will ensure the safety of Sinwanf, and the servant and 5 maids will provide the house with warmth and comfort. A little later, facial recognition will be configured at the gate so that they work automatically. The mansion was really impressive, although it seemed that the main character was completely not impressed. Meanwhile, a friendly director has already prepared a certificate of ownership and attached all the necessary documents. The guy understood that it was necessary to inspect everything well. A mansion worth 300 million yuan, an impressive purchase. And, according to the hero, he could look like a complete fool who walks with his mouth open and was surprised at everything. In the expensive case lay documents about real estate. It was evident that the director was well prepared. Having taken the documents, Sinwan immediately felt that their cover is on the quality of the material, and this is really what was needed. The guy still smiled, put the documents back in the case, and said that they should go. With a sigh of relief, the woman realized that this guy is probably some billionaire. Since they buy such an expensive house, he would not even check the documents. The building was really just gorgeous. It looked like a 19th century castle. A professional was engaged in landscaping around the mansion. He was a world-famous and talented landscape designer. Everything was specially developed for Shinvan. Looking at the boy, Lee realized that he was dressed very modest for enrichment, and apparently that they treat money quite indifferently. Perhaps he is a participant in some very rich family who does not want to advertise his monetary condition. Having examined the territory, the young man noticed that the landscape designer really worked for fame. But given what his parents he had, he needed to redo something and add a small field. He was going to plant cabbage and eggplant here, so that when they arrived, he could rejoice. Although this area was elite, then it was better to plant a bitter pumpkin and patch beans. A friendly girl also noted that if the master does not suit something, then they should not be shy about talking about it, because they will immediately call the designer and make changes to the landscape for free. Thinking, the guy did not immediately begin to talk about his plans. Suddenly, the system praised the hero, saying that he acted simply amazingly, and in a few minutes of his stay in his mansion, worth 300 million, he had already managed to find several good reasons to identify his dislike for this very mansion. Also, thanks to this action, the skin has appeared, and the owner now entered into a new stage of his life. Therefore, the system did not stand still. Watching the behavior of the rich man, Lee felt that even the best landscape designer could not please this guy, because of which this guy was really an interesting temperament. Laughing, the vice president noted that the master had already bought the pearl of their district at such a young age, and now she was sure that he was waiting for a brilliant future, mentioning that as soon as their head found out that Sinwan was ready to spend so much money on real estate, he immediately ordered them to serve the guy in the best way. But the hero was against this, and noticed that he should no longer bother him. Still, whether she sincerely hoped that the master would want to contact their company again in the future, however, she was nevertheless glowed that the guy was not at all happy with the purchase, spending 300 million yuan, and he was calm. Thus, the protagonist became the owner of a chic mansion in value to a fortune. Sinwon was nevertheless glad of such a purchase, even though you can't say that she pulled 300 million. Meanwhile, events continued to take place in another mansion. A girl was interested in who exactly bought this villa. The man said that the villa was bought by a young man by the name of Khan. He was about 20 years old. Hearing this, the lady was in shock. She did not expect that such a young person could purchase such expensive real estate. An elderly man nevertheless guessed that perhaps the lady knew what kind of person it was. Putting her head, the girl explained that in fact, the one who allowed himself to buy a mansion for 300 million yuan is clearly not an easy person. So if they want to know something about him, then the Khan family will clearly suspect it. That is why an influential girl ordered to choose a gift in order to pay a visit to Sinwon in the near future. The next day, the protagonist celebrated his triumphal ascent to a new business, because after the long 3 months of preparation, they are finally happy to report that Dujin Media is opening. He also wanted to thank the director of Gao Wen, who worked without his hands during these 3 months, which is why he thinks that everyone should also work hard, and then their efforts will necessarily lead to success. Other streamers were also happy to work in this company, and wanted to do everything possible in order to popularize it even more. The guy was really very grateful to his friend because she supported him at all stages. However, 3 months ago, Sinwon announced Gao Wen that she did not need to conduct direct broadcasts at all. Experienced employees had to help beginners, because now the company is not many skilled streamers. So first of all, you need to focus on teaching beginners. In addition, half of the donuts from the stream beginners, who were taught by Gao Wen, would go to her pocket. Only the girl believed that this was too much. The guy explained that GAO is literally one of the founders of the company, and besides all this, it is best versed in how to make an account with trendy, attract a different audience, and how to adjust the stream. Naturally, when they already fully and completely set up processes in the company, they will teach newcomers and everything will be tired. No one forbade the girl to lead direct broadcasts. A decisively tuned lady reported that now she firmly decided that she wanted to help the company. On the same day, events continued to take place in the morning. In a neighboring company, the former manager and manager of the protagonist noticed that there were some new accounts with streamers. There were a lot of people in the company of a competitor. Streamers actively tried to gain their audience, although they were beginners. That's just... The insulars believed that the competitors would not be so easy to create a new company and break up to the media giants. Having laughed, the malicious man believed that no one dares to fight his company. Suddenly, another man went around. He had a golden tooth and a huge gold jewelry hung around his neck. He mentioned that competitors were located across the road in a neighboring building. As it turned out, it was the brother of an unlucky manager who had already returned from the trip, freeing the workplace. He said that he had been waiting for him for a long time and was very bored. Smiling, the real manager noticed that his brother would clearly not interfere, because now they will show competitors who is the king of direct broadcasts here. Rubbing his hands, the manager sincerely hoped that they would succeed, and was determined. At the same time, the main character sat in his office and looked through streams. Like a real leader, he also did not forget to watch the designs of other houses. Different people sent him as many as 4 layouts at home, and they were all terrible. Putting his head, the young man understood that his mansion for that kind of money should look luxurious creatively. And not that's all. Meanwhile, someone tapped the guy into the office, and he immediately asked the guest to enter. It was Gao Wen. She said that their employees were supplied from competitors. Each of them is offered to broadcast with a streamer millionaire. An angry girl even showed one of the examples of such straps, which was due to which she was clearly unhappy. And looking at the correspondence, the young man noticed that it was the old tactics of the company. Large streamers throw a call to beginners. The scheme was old as the world, to conduct a joint direct broadcast between a popular streamer with millions of subscribers and small ones, and during the broadcast to humiliate it. This is their tactics to show who is the main one. Nevertheless, the protagonist had a plan on this score. He decided to clarify whether the competition consists of how much Donatov will come to streamer. Frightened by some strange plan, Gao found out whether her friend was going to utter rockets for newcomers for the sake of victory. Laughing, the guy admitted that this is true, because in this way he wanted to humiliate the streamers of the millionaires. Suddenly, Gaowen suddenly realized that it was possible when she had stripped and earned a lot of donates. These missiles were precisely from Sinvan. The old wisdom said that there was nothing sensible in money, since it is impossible to prudently spend them. But if you let them in for the right business, then this is another conversation. However, A friend believed that it was possible to save better, because more than half of the amount of the donates take a platform for streams. They could spend this money simply giving it to beginners without a commission of the platform. The shocked lady thought that her assumption was confirmed, and since Sinwon was able to pay her penalty under the contract, then it would not be difficult for her to utter rockets for him. According to the hero, life was too short. All of them are born without money, and without money die when they come to go to the next world. They will not take away the capital earned for the life of capital, which is why it makes no sense to save these pieces of paper. The best way to draw attention to the company and people is now the intensity of passions, and if now they will successfully take this plan, then the popularity of their company will fly to heaven in a matter of hours. Yes, and Gao Wen lacks confidence because she herself taught newcomers how to submit content correctly. After the broadcast, many viewers will run out of the company of competitors to them, and this will be a real victory. Nevertheless, Sinwon asked his girlfriend not to worry because he had a sense of proportion, so he would not spend all his money on the donates. Looking at the comrade, Gao realized that the behavior and thoughts of the rich were clearly different from her. Since Sinwon spent so many millions on the company, then spending a dozen million on donates would not be difficult for him. Having come to the streamers beginners, Gao Wen had to explain to them what exactly to do. Without understanding what was happening, the girls were confused and wanted to know from the mistress what to do, because if they agree to a joint stream, they will definitely lose in the donates. A decisively tuned girl exclaimed to all the streamers so that they immediately accept an invitation from competitors. Meanwhile, events continued to take place in the office of the main character. The company struggled with opponents, and thanks to a series of donates, Sinwon could still support the championship of its streamers. However, the guy did not spare money and only thought about whether it was worth choosing a set of pink wood furniture for the mansion or still adhere to the French restrained vintage. At the same moment, Gao Wen went with the not very good news that she wanted to report. One of the streamers lost to the opponents on a joint stream, and did it very quickly apparently. One of the main ones sat and specially monitored the situation on stream. Everything was already prepared for an unexpected answer, and the colleague only wanted to know when they would begin. A smart guy realized that it was necessary to wait a bit and give them time, let them rejoice, and are killed by their victory, but when they already relax, Sinwon would come with his donates. Feeling a little embarrassed, Gao nevertheless tormented the ardor, saying later that she was really in a hurry. True, it was worth remembering that for their children the combat mood is important, and seeing their inevitable defeat, they will begin to get lost, because of which they need to be taught that even under the best conditions you cannot give slack and you need to go to the end. In a neighboring company, the manager has already begun to celebrate his victory, taking champagne. He did not care that Gao Wen left the company, because their new rising star Nong Ran could already compete with hundreds of thousands of yuan in a matter of minutes. However, the brother understood that they won some unknown and small company, which is why there was nothing to rejoice. Even though their company received tens of millions for a penalty of Gao Wen, the man still did not leave that they had lost a valuable asset in her face. Suddenly, a man came a message from one of the clients who said that Gao Wen is now working in another company. Getting angry, the brother immediately shouted to the manager about his discontent, said that he had to say that Gao Wen works for competitors. Nevertheless, the manager did not want to fall into the mud face in front of his brother, because of which he immediately began to get nervous. From this, the villain said that Gao Wen found for himself some kind of richer milk-and-off, and he just helped her to pay for a contract under the contract. Perhaps the money turned her head off, and now she thinks that she's able to establish her company and reach the top in the media sector. The brother considered for the fifth that there was nothing wrong with this, because they definitely had to win. Suddenly, one of the employees entered the office and began to shout that their company had problems. Huge donates began to appear on all streams at their competitors. The manager at the same second remembered that the last time the same donator was able to win in battle only on one stream, and now they spend 10 at the same time, and he wins for everyone. His money is clearly unlucky. Turning to the brother, the man suggested that most likely their company donates to their own streamers. They have a difference of several million yuan on each broadcast in the donates of minimums, which simply cannot be overtaken. Get angry, the brother shouted that they could not lose. But the manager believed that he should not worry about this, because this is probably just a random donat. But this was not entirely true, and the employee, this already noticed while shouting out the word. A new series of donations began. A streamer from the new company gave many expensive gifts, from which the Mertzevites began to get nervous. Such a turn of events immediately made them think about whether they could really win in this fight. Trembling with anger, his brother decided to find out from the manager if he is really sure that he should not worry. Turning around, the man firmly decided that they must win in the confrontation. The protagonist, meanwhile, continued to continuously utter, "He sent such amounts that people could only earn in his entire life." The shocked Gao Wen did not understand why all this, because they had already defeated the donates, but the young man continued to utter further. A strip of donut into the enemy in this battle of the streamers was simply destroyed. Laughing, the hero only exclaimed that the young streamers had not yet seen the world of great streaming. But nothing, because now he showed him. In fact, Gao did not even know how to react to this, because there were so many gifts that she did not receive so much in her whole life. However, the guy asked the girl to calm down a little because she was very distracted. The young man asked her not to forget their main goal, namely, to achieve the top in the media space and become those who cannot be surpassed. Now it was only necessary to go to the guys and praise them for the work done, since the streamers from the company of competitors lost. Now they should remove their company's attitude and nick and put their name. Thus, a friend went to follow the instructions, but the main character had to continue to go about his business. The young man still examined the very room of his dreams about his tablet, which he chose so carefully. There was a purple tree in the room, and there was also a French style, which is why he wanted something like that. Nevertheless, the hero was also very interested in how much money he had in his account, because the system all this time gave him rewards. Looking at the bank account, Sinwan was simply shocked. He had 1 billion yuan on his account, because the more he spent, the more money the system gave him. Meanwhile, in the office of a large media, the reporter indicated her to bring her all the information about a new company called Dujin Media. Now all the media drew attention to the hype, and people wanted to get the first to get information about this company, because the young company literally seized the market. The office of the streaming platforms discussed that in just one night, the company increased the number of subscribers by 2 million. This was by some miracle since the founding of their company. This is the most outstanding results. Young streamers were also not against such success. They even liked that they were gaining subscribers very quickly. In fact, for girls, this work was tiring because they worked very much, because of which they were tired. Having come to the boss, the girl was delighted. They said that the main streamers of the company of opponents fought with them. At first, they were very scared, but in the confrontation, they won. Due to the series of large donates, the streamers also wanted to get their salary as soon as possible. Their boss already distributed their shares in accordance with the contract. Suddenly, the system praised the master, since the system was touched by his actions, so it gave 500 yuan as a reward. Only the hero was not very pleased with such a turn of events, because such a reward can only frighten the audience. Gao Wen watched everything that was happening at the same time. She was probably proud of her friend. A good-natured girl did everything possible to help a friend, because she understood that it was mutual. The competitors were indignant at the same time. They read a news feed and realized that they were simply humiliated. One of the colleagues entered the office and offered to change the name of the company because a lot of strips from the streams were already made and they were celebrated on social networks, and also asked that their streamers have changed the name of the company and nicknames. This trick really did not play in their favor, since earlier it was the organization's tactics in order to humiliate streamers even more. Realizing that the leaders were not ready to listen to her, the girl still decided to leave, hastily closing the door. Having hit the manager, the man began to shout that they promised him that the confrontation would be easier, but 500 million yuan was equal. Because of this, the company will become a laughingstock. Now they are like sexual rags, about which everyone would wipe their feet. However, the manager did not understand what was the matter, because in fact the company earned a lot of money and there was no loss. The brother was still angry and ordered not to say a word no longer because the manager is clearly too stupid for this. At this moment, just competitors looked at the stream of the main character's company. The girls skillfully begged for the donates by dance. Because of this outcome of the events, Boss realized that if Gao Wen was now in their company, at least 100 million would have been bored of these 500 million. All these events occurred literally in one night, and the same donator was not the first time supported Gao Wen. The last time she streamed in their company, he also uttered large amounts to her. According to the manager, before this, the donator looked as usual. The angry brother did not want to listen to him anymore, and asked not to hang noodles on his ears and deceive everyone. and even himself. Putting his head, the villain was really very ashamed because he literally destroyed the business that was built for years. Not suffering such exits from his colleague, an influential man literally pushed him his feet, not wanting to see him anymore. In the office of the main character, Gao Wen decided to attract attention. The colleague was very interested in whether it was really reasonable to spend money like that, because she considered that out of 500 millions earned, they received only 180 million, and each of the streamers would take himself several million. However, the hero believed that in fact they were not so much spent. Gao Wen fell into a stupor because of this. In fact, the young man bore only 200 million. All the other money is the donates of the audience, who apparently was really interested in observing this, because of which they actually spent a rather small amount. Feeling awkwardly, her friend still realized that Sinwan was a little rounded the amount. She would never have thought that one day he could say that 200 million is not very much. The guy also did not forget to mention that they are already writing about them in the media. And they say that in order to achieve such results as they are, you need to spend countless hours and a lot of money. That is why Sinwan was convinced that Gao Wen was waiting for a brilliant future. But now, he would like to thank her for courageous and responsible work in the company and for agreeing to train newcomers. After all, when a person literally spoke to his business, he will encourage others to new achievements. From this moment on, the path should have been even easier to the top. And in addition, Sinwan was about to invest not only in streaming, but also wanted to launch his talk show and start withdrawing dramas. At that very moment, the boy rang the phone. Probably this call was very important. As it turned out, this was called an employee of the repair company, which the hero recently turned to. In general, the hero decided to go about his business because he was called the company that is engaged in repairs, so it is urgent to go home and follow the decoration. Also, the guy was not opposed to the fact that Gao Wen would take part of the monetary rewards for stream for himself, as it was stipulated, because before that they agreed that some of the newcomers would go to her pocket, so everything is honest. The young man's business ideology was really simple, because the more workers work and get money, the more they are happy, and the better they begin to work. The statement was really true, which is why Gao Wen joyfully agreed. Sometime later, the event continued to take place at the entrance to the Sinwan mansion. Inside the builder's mansion, one of the rooms was diligently rebuilt, making it on order. They stacked cement and bricks near the entrance, and the hero asked them to be more accurate, because it was impossible to dismantle the supporting walls. Suddenly, some elderly man granted the boy to visit, which was rather unexpected. The man explained that he heard that they had a new neighbor, so he granted a visit to him. There was nothing at hand really, so he decided to bring the products they produce. Looking at the stranger, Sinwan realized that he looked like a butler from a rich family, and he could not occupy a manner, as if he were some kind of hero from the series. I thought a little. She did not realize that he would also like him to have a butler. In order to accept the gift, the hero decided to remove his gloves. Laughing, the homeowner explained that he is now in full swing and a complete mess, and he himself was all in the mud, which is why he asked him to not be angry with him. However, the butler also apologized because he came suddenly and thought in advance that since and not the neighbors, he would probably be often seeing out, and therefore decided not to postpone the meeting. So, if something would be needed or difficult, then Sinwan may not be shy address. The hero was immediately clear what kind of area it was, because it seems that all the tenants are rich and famous here, since even the butler behave in this way. The gift box also looked impressive. It was repulsed by gold and silver, and inside the wild mountain, ginseng was supposed to be lying inside. Having shook hands, Sinwan thanked for the gift and said that he also believes that neighbors in difficult situations should help each other as soon as he figure out their affairs. He will definitely visit new comrades. A few hours later, dinner came, and the workers had to relax. The hero was also very tired enough and understood that he was already engaged in repairs without a break. He needed a vacation. Suddenly, someone called him on the phone and said that this weekend they would have a meeting of graduates. The comrade also heard that the girl he was running at school would also come. The meeting of graduates was a good reason for the show because during his studies he was the worst in his class. He was called the poor and was always invited to a meeting of graduates only in order to mock once again. But this time things were different, and the main character was really ready for the meeting, which is why he was happy to agree. Hearing the answer from the young man, the man was just in shock, because he did not expect that he would agree so quickly. Probably this happened because of the girl he had run before. In another mansion of the same area, the butler told the girl that the new neighbor was quite polite and courteous, did not look down on him, and even though he was a butler, he still treated him with respect. Even before taking a box with a gift, he took off his gloves and wiped his hands. In general, this young man looked very decent, and the man thought that he could begin to gradually establish relations with him, and he worked with the builders to rebuild the mansion, doing everything with your own hands. During the story, the neighbor suddenly heard that someone was approaching her. Turning frantically, she immediately looked at the uninvited guest, exclaimed that he should be again. Some guy really brought the girl to the house and was arrogant enough to walk around the mansion. The mistress was clearly unhappy and decided to clarify the uninvited guest why he brought a man here. The arrogant guy explained Ping Zhao that this was her future daughter. In law, he loved Silly and was going to marry her. Starting to cry, Silly pressed pity, saying that this is a problem only in her and she better leave. That's just, these tricks did not work for Ping Zhao, since it was quite experienced in relationships and business. Blaglessly, the girl showed all the species that it was better for them to leave because Madame Ping Zhao was not very happy to see them, and the villain did not want to spoil the relationship with her sister. An unshakable man began to convince her that the sister behaves like this all his life. And do not worry, this playfulness of behavior was even more angry with Ping Zhao. She no longer wanted to endure it. However, the brother continued to say that the grandfather's words should not be forgotten, and if Pin wants to get an inheritance, then she needs to get married, and probably the sister envies the fact that he still managed to find Silly in order to marry her. Turning around, the sister began to laugh, because she was only 20 years old. It was early to think about marriage, and unlike her brother, she did not chase the inheritance, and does not run to marry the first meeting. In addition, she will not allow anyone to get closer to her, and immediately share with him the state of the Pin family, because her marriage will depend only on the consent of her grandfather. Sometime later, the events continued to occur near the expensive restaurant. Gao Wen was going to go to the client to deliver the goods, and about an hour later she was going to call after the Shinvan. Thus, the girl in an expensive car hit the road because she was in a hurry. It was at that moment that the protagonist did not leave the foreboding that today he could earn a lot of money. Looking in front of him, suddenly he noticed several people who were closely watching him. It was a company of young people. They drew attention to how a stranger looked. Suddenly, the blonde noticed that this guy was called Sinwan. He arrived at the Mercedes of the S-Class. This could cost almost 10 million yuan. But the guys did not believe that he could have an expensive car, and probably he meets some kind of rich woman. And in fact, this is her car. Nevertheless, it turned out that the hero arrived at the meeting of classmates, and the former classmates did not believe that he became a rich man. Not very friendly young people thought that the young man was dating the old woman, because the young girl could not be so rich. Laughing, Sinwan asked the company whether they envy that he was meeting with a rich man, because none of them could order any of the rich. The girl did not like such a statement very much, and she exclaimed that she did not envy anyone at all, and she did not need money. However, Sinwan knew very well that Van Duo married the director of a large factory, and specially forced him to part with her wife to take her place. This fact was even more angry with the lady. A few seconds later, another car drove up. More and more people gathered to meet classmates. The same couple got out of the car. They were young people who previously communicated with the neighbor's neighbor. Classmates immediately noticed that their goddess drove up. Over time, she became even more beautiful, and she also got a gentleman that was a member of the Pin family. Pushing the guy to meet, the former classmate repeated to him that they told him that Sinwan had come here only for the sake of Silly, and asked to approach her in order to say hello. Putting his head, the guy was a little embarrassed to say hello to the goddess. Feeling rather embarrassed, the girl answered with a mutual greeting, but she was clearly not at herself. Explaining everything to his classmate, the young man mentioned that one girl is not strict, so he allows him to say hello to others. Other classmates, meanwhile, suggested that Sinwan clearly wanted to come closer or talk longer with the goddess, but apparently realized that nothing was shining and decided to leave. A rich youth turned to his girlfriend and asked her to call when everything was over because he was going to pick her up later. At first glance, a kind girl said goodbye to her gentleman, and it was kind enough. Everyone envied Silly because they thought that she had a great relationship with a rich guy, and even asked to invite them all to the wedding. Laughing awkwardly, the girl nevertheless said that although her boyfriend was already busy, he still decided to let her down, and she would like to go to the restaurant as soon as possible. There was a special rented room for the event because a party was planned there. All classmates joyfully drank drinks and sang funny songs because there was karaoke. Only the main character sat on the sidelines and watched everything that was happening. He clearly did not really like this event. One of the guys mentioned that due to the economic crisis, he, unfortunately, managed to acquire only one floor on the site opposite the city hall. Hearing this, classmates were just in shock, because the same site opposite the city hall cost literally tens of millions of yuan. Meanwhile, the girls were discussing that Silly was really very lucky, and in the future she planned to become a housewife after the wedding. As a sign of his serious intentions, and her boyfriend even gave her a gorgeous ring with a huge diamond, in the girls' thoughts there was only that the poor were just envious of her. And there was nothing to be done here because she was born in such a beauty. Meanwhile, the boy wrote that the repair in the building was successfully completed. As it turned out, Sinwan completely forgot to sacrifice the promised building for the hospital due to many matters. The arrogant former classmates suggested that Sinwan came here only to play on the phone, because most likely he was upset that their goddess was getting married. However, the guy exclaimed that he was not sad about this, because since Silly decided to get married, they, on the contrary, should support her in such a decision. Otherwise, the red-haired guy decided to ask the hero where he works, once receives 5,000 yuan a month, or if it is just a salary with overtime. The undertaking in the conversation, the young man immediately put his phone in his pocket because he realized that he had to act. Smiling, Sinwan explained that he really worked overtime. Indeed, for him personally, the most important thing in life is that the world becomes much better. This statement made all classmates laugh because they believed that it is better to make the world with such a meager salary. According to the ugly people, Sinwan's age was already quite serious, but thought still like a child, because of which he was offered to go to a construction site and drag bricks, because you could earn more. These words touched to the core of the protagonist. He wanted to show everyone what he was really capable of. Seeing the reaction of the guy, classmates immediately shut up and said that they joked, because in fact they all said all this for his good, and they could even help Sinwan find a new job. Smiling maliciously, the hero only said that it is really very nice on their part. Nevertheless, he told former classmates to continue to have fun, eat, drink plenty, and he was going to leave because he started a new finish in his house, so that a construction team needed a supervision. But no one believed that such a guy managed to buy a house, because if he had a house in a rich area, then he should invite everyone to a housewarming. Laughing, the hero explained that his modest monastery is too small to accommodate everyone, and a classmate mentioned that housing prices in the city are just a cosmos, and a salary of 5,000 yuan needs several days of a hunger strike in order to accumulate a couple of square meters. Sinwan continued to claim that classmates really can squeeze into his house, but the classmate meanwhile stopped him, saying that the guy could not leave without paying the score. Having experienced anger, the young man nevertheless said that he would be sent a check in a general conversation, after which he will pay his share. The blonde continued to repeat that they are in the elite restaurant of the city. It will not be possible to take it and just open a bottle of first-class wine and then take and leave, because Sinwan could just take and get out of the conversation. With a sigh, the young man showed a transaction where 10,000 yuan was sent. This situation forced classmates to make fun of the hero even more strongly, because over the years his nature has not changed in any way. He is still the same Black and Zam. In their opinion, he saved these 10,000 yuan and whole eternity to boast of them and show himself. The girl also mentioned that it was not worth it because his check still would not have reached 10,000 yen. At that very moment, Silly looked at Sinvana and exclaimed that she would pay for him, because of which everyone was delighted with the deed of the goddess. Thus, she just wanted to humiliate the boy, pretending that she is very kind for such acts. If it weren't for the hero to know the true nature of this girl, he was really glad to thank her. But in fact, Silly had previously called him the insignificance and poor. Thus, Sinwan refused help, saying that 10,000 yuan for him is not so much, so you should not pay for it. Other girls began to be indignant because Silly showed a gesture of goodwill, and she was not even thanked. They also refused. That's just, since the girl was called the goddess several times, she apparently believes that she really ascended into the pantheon of the gods. Sinwan thought that since they were all old classmates, they were not facing each other to put on masks. And it is not clear who, but Silly is not clear. It seems not changed. An unshakable guy nevertheless claimed that he would pay his share in the check for food. Suddenly, one of the classmates exclaimed that it was not worth doing this because Sinwan would clearly not be affordable, because they were in the VIP hall, and therefore the VIP client should pay. The young man ordered the chief manager to call here because he wanted to pay the account completely. The waiter explained that the manager was now busy, and the VIP client should really pay. However, after the classmate as a VIP client asked to call the administrator, the waiter immediately agreed. All this was done so that Sinwon put himself as a mockery. The classmate hoped for this very much. A few minutes later, the manager arrived. He was clearly unhappy that he was called along such a trifle. The young man decided to find out if he needed a VIP visitor's card to pay for the vape room. The administrator replied that the card was really needed, which is why Sinwon wanted to issue it. This only caused laughter in classmates, because in order to arrange a web card, it was necessary to spend at least 500,000 yuan. So now Sinwon will not be able to pretend to be rich. And looking at the bastards, the guy decided to clarify how much it would cost to expel all those present from this VIP room. The manager explained that the matter is not in money, because their institution first of all takes care of customers. Looking resolutely at the man, the young man offered him 10 million yuan for such a service. This proposal turned out to be too good to be true, and the manager simply fell into a stupor. As if nothing had happened, the hero began to go to the table in order to sit down. Crouching, he began to eat food, and explained that he did not need a VIP card. He just wants to eat alone, in silence. The administrator continued to look at the stranger and saw that, judging by his clothes, he was not at all in. And besides, who in his right mind will spend 10 million on food? Of course, the chief manager understood everything, but such jokes were too wrong for him. At that very moment, the main character took out his gold bank card. Her color was a symbol that it was the most expensive and unique credit card. The black was the best, while the gold was lower than the class. Seeing the boy's card, classmates began to mock even more, since the rank of his card was quite low. All the rich had black cards. This whole situation really aroused laughter from others. No one would have thought that Sinwon was able to pay so much only to expel everyone from the VIP room. Paying with the help of a bank card through the terminal, everyone assumed that there could not be so many funds on his account. Frantically yeast, the waitress suddenly exclaimed that the payment of the master had successfully passed. Hearing that the payment was made, the administrator cried out nervously, "He has never seen anything like it in his life." All classmates immediately shut up, because Sinwon really had an impressive amount in the bank account, and he clearly had more than 10 million yuan. Such a joy was necessary only so that the manager nevertheless would give the guy the opportunity to eat calmly, and at the same time expelled all intrusive classmates. Thanks to this act, the administrator told all guests that they will have to leave the institution. One of the dissatisfied customers shouted that this was an incorrect attitude from Sinwon, because they are all former classmates, and they simply cannot be taken and expelled. Other girls also said that many of them are known in the city, and there will be consequences because of such an act. As it turned out, the protagonist was not afraid to make enemies, because classmates specially invited him to this meeting, because they needed to find a scapegoat, because they all wanted to mock him and amuse their pride. With such an approach, they needed to think that they could make enemies, and Sinwon really can afford to expel absolutely all the enemies from their entourage. Dissatisfied girls began to say that it was just food, and they are better off to really leave here. Suddenly, a rich dude arrived at the party and shouted that he would give 10 million and 1 yuan so that Sinwon would get out of here. Silly still wanted to know the gentleman why he came here, because he already had business. But the guy only replied that he had nothing more important than his girlfriend. This was the same guy from the Pin family, as well as their savior, because everyone thought that Sinwon had no chance of him, since the magnates would clearly not come out to compete with his family. The hero at that moment realized that the enemy simply raised the rate by 1 yuan, specifically in order to mock him. After a little thought, he remembered that the name of this guy was familiar, and it was precisely that the butler came with a gift from the Pin family. The displeased guy again attracted attention, asking the hero why he was quiet, suggesting that 10 million is all his savings. According to Silly, Sinwon was obviously not even. The goddess believed that he should not contact him because he was clearly not in himself. The disgruntled young man mentioned that the guy should not be here at all, since it was a dispute between him and classmates. However, he still thanked his opponent, because he could not think that such a rich man would come and would help him earn even more money. Having taken out his bank card, the young man decided to increase the rate and added another 5 million yuan to the amount. Hearing this, the administrator turned red. He did not understand what was happening, as if the gods had come down from heaven to give even more money. Or perhaps it was just a dream. The rates rose. The rich man wanted to pay 15 million and 1 yuan, but the main character raised the rate to 20 million yuan, 20 million yuan was successfully paid, because of which the system gave Sinwan and another 50 million as a reward. At that moment, Silly only thought that to marry the right man is really the secret of success. The disgruntled youth exclaimed that he was already tired of his opponent and realized that 30 million yuan. That's just classmates still wanted a Pin family participant to win this competition and tell him to continue the battle. However, at that moment the boy's reaction was rather strange. He was just silent and continued to look at his opponent. Silly ordered him not to dinner, otherwise she would be humiliated until the end of her days. The rich man took up his head. In his thoughts, it was only that this guy named Sinwan was simply sick, because he spent a lot of money on ordinary food. As it turned out, the youngest son of the family, Ping, was going to buy a share in this restaurant and talk with the board of directors about the company's campaign as soon as he devotes this beggar. But 30 million was too much the amount. The opponent clearly did not print the money, because of which it was too large. Meanwhile, the waitress brought the bank card of the protagonist, for which he thanked her. The administrator even began to conduct an auction, saying that the last rate is 30 million yuan, and if there are no more suggested proposals, then they have a new winner. Talking rage, Ping knew that the poor classmates should pay everything for this. And Silly was not even a member of the Pin family, and he should not at all get involved. Of course, he decided to show off, but now they all need to deal with this themselves. Smiling, the hero still decided to ask about the opponent why he does not want to put 30 million in one yuan. At that very moment, the guy rang the phone, which allowed him to be distracted from the dispute. Feeling awkwardly, the young man said that he was called, and he needs to urgently answer, but Sinwan was just about to eat at that moment. Having answered the call, Pin immediately heard a familiar voice. It was his sister. The sister asked about whether the brother really spent 20 million in one yuan, and hoped that with this money he bought a share in the restaurant. Trembling with fear, the brother began to explain himself. They say that this did not make his sister's because he decided where to spend money. It was just that the girl did not worry at all, but her grandfather was worried, so he asked her to call back to the youngest. Seeing a strong shock, the guy clearly did not expect the old man to follow where they spent his money. At the moment, the blonde was heading to the restaurant and entered the elevator so the connection will disappear. But it's okay, because they will soon be able to see each other. Singing his teeth angrily, the youngest son of the family realized that his sister had been following him all this time, and now he would come to the place of events. If Zhao can find out exactly where the brother spent the money, then he will end. Seeing that the conversation was over, Sinwan exclaimed that it seems to the opponent time to bet. Turning to other classmates, Pin exclaimed that they are all sick here on their heads, because the maximum that should be given for this food is 20,000 yuan, and they are not some kind of on the exchange to guess the course of food. Having scratched his head, the red-haired guy exclaimed that such an act would really disgrace Pin's family. Aggressing one of Silly's comrades, the guy shouted to cover his mouth because he was no one in order to talk to him like that. The administrator at that moment began to reassure the young man. Nevertheless, a friendly man proposed to return all the money because Mr. Pin was no longer going to participate in the auction, and the young man asked to write to his secretary on this issue. For the protagonist, such a contest was already quite boring, because he thought that he would fall out more money, but it turned out that in the end he received less as a reward than we would like. One of the classmates turned to Silly, saying that if she does nothing now, it would be a real shame, because she is probably the most unpleasant when some Sinwan dictates her conditions there. The girl was then at a loss. She did not understand what was happening, and thought that she was not even worth coming to this meeting of graduates. Turning to her gentleman, the young lady asked him to pay more money, because a lot of people looked at them, and the impression would deteriorate because of this. That's just Pina to the youngest. It was absolutely all the same. He hit the girl with all his strength and shouted that he was humiliated now, because of which there would be no wedding. The arrogant man ordered his ex-girlfriend to get out of here, because he no longer wanted to be with her. Silly remembered that her cavalier himself said that they would always live together and die on one day, and now for the sake of a miserable 30 million, he took and decided to part with her, literally because of ordinary pieces of paper. The point was not a miserable 30 million, but that because of it, the honor of the Ping family was disgraced. Of course, the youngest saw that Silly was beautiful, she had good genes, and they would have wonderful children, but it was completely not love. Turning to the manager, Sinwan nevertheless decided to clarify whether he could now take and calmly eat alone. The man gladly agreed to take everyone out of the building. The youngest son of the Pin family began to leave, and exclaimed that this was not the end, because someday Sinwan would definitely encounter him and recognize the real power of the family. At that very moment, the door to the VIP room began to open, and the eldest daughter of the Pin family decided to clarify what the conversation was going on. The young man was clearly unhappy and shocked that his sister was already in this room. It was clearly not in his plans. Stepping closer to her brother, the blonde decided to clarify exactly what he was doing here. Pushing the younger, suddenly, the lady turned to the administrator and said that their family brings 200 million yuan to the development of this restaurant. No one could believe that the family has such a large amount of money. And apparently, the brother and word cannot say without the permission of the older sister. Also, Zhang asked the manager to give them a lot to discuss them with Xinwan and asked for help to free the room. The man was clearly not opposed. Hearing this statement, classmates could not imagine why Madame Ping came here personally in order to discuss something with the Xinwan. Everyone was unhappy that the former classmates hid something from them. There could not be such that the poor bastard could sharply become rich. The smart guy, meanwhile, looked at the mistress and realized that he would like to know her closer. An unshakable manager turned to all guests and asked them to go out. Laughing, Zhang also did not forget to mention that the brother was already waiting at home. It was a grandfather. Taking awkwardness and disgust, former classmates still began to leave, showing everyone their dissatisfaction. Mr. Pin also began to leave, and Silly tried to catch up with him because she did not want to lose her chance to marry a rich dude. The young girl screamed that she was to blame and did not expect that everything could turn out like this, because of which she begged not to leave her. Zhang exclaimed at the same second that if Madame Silly still wants to live in this city without unnecessary problems, she was asked not to approach anymore and at all to do any case with the Pin family. The frightened girl instantly began to run away, because she realized that if she still tries to return her ex, she would have big problems. The dissatisfied younger brother began to leave, sighing heavily. He understood that he was defeated today. Meanwhile, the administrator immediately wanted to manage to bring fresh food and asked to wait a few minutes. A friendly girl came closer to the main character and decided to clarify whether he was against talking.